Mr. Renner.
Yes.
G'day.
Hello. Yeah,
G'day.
exactly. Turn you off now. I can't.
I'm quite surprised. I'm quite surprised how much grey hair you've got in your beard.
Yeah. I could do something about it, but
Then again,
shave it off.
Given how old you are, I expect you to have a lot more grey in your hair.
You just can't see it as much. Well, he's got the opposite. More grey in the hair and not in the beard. He obviously hasn't got enough stress in his job.
Blair, sit down.
Report is read. We'll hand over to you. So we're on Housing Infrastructure Fund, page 560, item 10.
Thank you, Council, Mayor Andrew. Today is the culmination of a process that's taken nearly 2 years and a decision to be taken at the end of that 2-year process. But it's also, following your earlier adoption of the long-term plan, the first major decision in relation to that long-term plan. So it's a nice melding of the two processes. 2 years ago, in August 2016, Council agreed to participate in an indicative business case proposal with the Housing Infrastructure Fund, and we've submitted two indicative business cases, one for Peacocks, one for Rotukari. That process was subsequently followed up with a more conclusive series of business cases, and then a final proposal was agreed to be submitted for the Peacock cell after the government went through its process, and that was agreed by Council through a detailed business case in December 2017. That business case was accepted by the government, and the government's acceptance of that business case is included in attachment to the report today in terms of a signed ministerial approval for that detailed business case. The Peacocks Housing Infrastructure Fund scheme was included as part of the long-term plan consultation process, where the Peacock growth cell and the funding was part of the process. As you know from your decision earlier today, the long-term plan, including the Peacocks Growth Infrastructure and Housing Infrastructure Fund, has been included in the long-term plan. And so today is the last step in that process, which is the acceptance of the loan facility agreement, which gives effect to that Housing Infrastructure Fund funding for the Peacocks Growth Cell. I also note that separately there is funding from New Zealand Transport Agency, which is the other substantial portion, and in appendices 3 to 5 there is correspondence there from NZTA and clarification from the Minister that funding has also been approved. So today, Council, you've been asked to finalise and agree the loan agreement with the government in terms of the Housing Infrastructure Fund. And just reminding you, this is for a 10-year interest-free loan. And when I say a 10-year interest-free loan, it's actually an interest-free loan that will be drawn down every quarter for the next over the next 10 years. The majority of those drawdowns will be in the first 5 years when the capital expenditure occurs. And that will run for a 10-year period, each of those loans interest-free. Appendix 6 highlights the drawdowns that Council is intending to make, and that's in accordance with the business case. It's also in accordance with our 10-year plan documentation. And so you'll see there that the loan actually runs out over 20 years between when we start from the 1st of July next week through to 20 years away. So it's a long-term agreement that we have here with the government, because we are expending money over the first 10 years of the 10-year plan. Mark Renner from Tompkins Wake is here to answer any specific questions in relation to the loan agreement, but I can confirm that the agreement is largely in accordance with the documentation we have with the Local Government Funding Agency. It's consistent with the other 4 growth councils who are also part of the Housing Infrastructure Fund. There is one element where the agreement included in Schedule 1 wasn't quite complete, and that's in relation to the milestones. We have since concluded the milestones section of the document. I do have a copy of that here for anyone who wishes to see that, but the milestones section was just repeating in the document the dates that were in the detailed business case. So we haven't We haven't changed or committed to any different dates. The milestones are as per the detailed business case. Through the Mayor, the second part of the report is seeking delegation to the Chief Executive to then award 3 contracts under delegation once we're at that point of awarding those contracts. So we're in a process where we want to proceed with urgency to get on and deliver this project. Council will remember a couple of months ago you gave approval for us to do some enabling works in terms of Housing Infrastructure Fund to get ready to be able to press go from 1 July. We are ready to issue tender documents to our professional services panel for transportation and waters related consultancy services to go through a tender process. We would like to be able to award those contracts as soon as that tender process has been completed, to shorten the time frame and enable us to actually get on and start delivering the work. So we're seeking delegation for the Chief Executive to do that. The money that is sought in the report is all part of the Housing Infrastructure Fund. It's all budgeted. It's all part of the spend profile that we have in the detailed business case. The third element is to also directly appoint the property group in terms of our preferred supplier in terms of the property acquisition program. We have to acquire a substantial number of properties in the Peacock area. Again, all those property acquisitions as part of the detailed business case. We'd like to get on with that, and we would like to start that process from Monday next week. So we are recommending that we engage the property group. The property group is the preferred supplier of NZTA, and so we are looking to use the same provider the NZTA uses, so we can again take advantage of negotiations they're having with property owners to again speed up the process to enable us to acquire the land. Acquiring the land is one of the most critical parts of delivering the Housing Infrastructure Fund infrastructure. If we don't own the land, we can't then build the bridge and the road and the pipes. So it's a critical part of the process. So we're seeking delegation for the Chief Executive to directly appoint the property group. So, Your Worship, as I've said, this is the first major decision in the long-term plan, but it's also the culmination of a 2-year process that Council has made a number of decisions upon to get to this point today. So this is a significant decision, but it's also a momentous occasion for the city because it is giving effect to the Peacock's growth area and certainly allowing that project to get going. So happy to take questions.
Recommendation seconded by the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Angela.
I've got a whole page, so I'll just do a few and then you can move on to be fair, and I'll sweep them up at the end if they haven't been answered. Thanks, Blair. Really good report. There was an update about the final agreement. Did you just you didn't say that in your opening comments, did you?
Yes, I did. So I just said that I've got the relevant pages here if anyone is interested.
Oh, that was that. Okay.
And the only change of any note is the milestones.
Okay. All right. So I'd like a copy of that when you doesn't have to be after the meeting. So just going to try and wrap my head around all of the financial implications and impacts to council. So the $180.3 million loan will be drawn down on a quarterly basis. I'm making an assumption that we don't, to oversimplify it, we don't put the spade in the ground. We don't wait till every quarter of a year when we're drawing this down. So in the gap between, in the time between when we draw down money and we need to do a body of work, is there any disparity there? Are we going to have to just draw down on our debt first, or is it, because it reads to me like we have to do the work and then we can draw down on the loan in the agreement?
So in effect, Ange, there is a very small timing difference there. So if we start on day one, first month we'll incur some cost and we'll pay for that on the 20th of the following month. Yep. Second month will incur some costs and we'll pay for that on the 20th of the second month. Third month will incur some cost, but we'll also then make a claim to the government. So effectively, there will be 2 months where we've spent some money, and then in the third month we make the claim to recover it. So we obviously sought monthly claims. The government weren't able to give us that. They said quarterly was.
So do we have? That's what I thought from reading the report and the government agreement for this loan. Given that in the first 6 years we're drawing down 4.1 million per year. And if you're saying 8 months of the year, we will be using our own debt capacity for the entire life of the project because they're only paying quarterly. Have we worked out then, A, do we have that capacity of debt, and B, how much the interest cost charges are going to be, because they'll have to be ratepayer funded. Government's not going to reimburse us for incurred interest charges when we're drawing down our own debt.
It's not a substantial exposure, Angela, because it's only for the portion of monies relating to that particular quarter, so it's not the entire year's expenditure. So
yeah, I understand that.
And so it's only the 2 months of expenditure in relation to each quarter, and then immediately it's captured by the interest-free loan. So it's not a substantial sum. It's part of our working capital funding.
It is still interest that we are going to be accruing through the whole life of this project, though.
Which is similar to our normal business.
Did we? I'm sure you, whoever went down, did try and negotiate for the government to pay first and then dig later, and they just weren't responsive to that at all.
Yes, we tried all sorts of things through the negotiation process. You'll note in the report that we refer to that we make no repayments until the end of the 10-year loan term. We sought that. We sought a off-balance sheet structure. We sought a number of things. Yeah. I guess I can say, Angela, we tried every and all angles to get the best deal for council.
I'm sure.
And this is the final position. And I must say that the position that's represented in the loan agreement here is as per the detailed business case that council received back in December. So nothing has changed in terms of what was described back then.
So you're saying the interest costs that will be incurred when we use... Oh, do we have capacity? Have you worked these equations through? Do we have capacity?
Yes.
To do that first. So the table on page... somewhere in this particular... What is that?
634.
There's a table anyway of... somewhere. Of payments is 51.6 million over the...
Yeah, 634.
Is that 634?
634.
And then, did I read this correctly? So there's 51.6 million paid over...
16 years?
Yes, and then there's a lump sum. So that lump sum would be 128.7 at the end of the term? 128.7 million at the end of the term, is that correct?
Not quite. It will be that with the aggregate figure, but because each drawing matures in 10 years after it's drawn, so it will roll. So the drawing that you make in September of this year will mature in September of 2028. So there will be a repayment at that point, and then that will continue until 2038.
But I did read it right though, isn't it? Somewhere in this report, I'm sure it said a lump sum at the end.
Yes, so the lump sum is after the 10 years of each loan.
Of each right.
loan. So again, we start the project 1 July this year. We'll draw down the first loan in September. 10 years, so 10 years from now, so September 2028, we will be due to pay back that loan. So there'll be a lump sum repayment required then. And so that number that you talked about, Angela, if you looked at that table, you'll see that there's a series of lump sum repayments every year, starting from year 12. And effectively that is the balance of each loan being paid back 10 years after we drew it down.
I see.
Less any repayments made prior to that.
Yeah, okay.
So that is absolutely true to the spirit of this is a 10-year interest-free loan for each drawdown, less the fixed repayments that we were required to make. And
right.
The fixed repayments are as described in the document.
Yeah, okay. Now, given we've just signed off a budget and the budget's tight, we've heard that, there's not going to be a lot of room to move. As a consequence of the development contributions policy we've just adopted as a consequence of a GFC. I mean, these are all things that we're not going to be able to know will happen. What is our ability to pay a loan? Because as I read in the report, and under the principle growth pays for growth, we are relying on the development contributions as we are putting in infrastructure and resource consents are being done to pay this loan. What's our capacity if the world changes and those development contributions and that revenue is well underreported. I know I'm asking for crystal ball gazing here, Blair, but I need to understand that we've really thought that through and you can answer it.
Look, I think that question is probably better a 10-year plan question, but I'll answer it here because the 10-year plan includes all the assumptions that you see in front of you here. So the 10-year plan includes the capital expenditure outlined in this document. The 10-year plan includes the debt and it includes the repayments and includes the development contributions revenue. So the things that you've described there affect the 10-year plan in totality. What you see in front of you here is that we have a loan agreement based on when we draw down money, and we have some fixed repayments which are very conservative, which means that it's highly likely our revenue that we will get back from development contributions will be more than the fixed repayments we've signed up to, because we've been very conservative. And if you look back at the detailed business case, you would see how that was a conservative calculation. So I think, Angela, the issue sits more at the overall long-term plan. If the conditions change, it's how we look at the overall long-term plan, not so much the housing infrastructure fund in isolation. Because the issues you described there are more our council finances as a whole, as opposed to just this particular facility.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess my question was around the development contributions revenue that we're estimating we're going to receive as we go along this project is substantially higher than we've ever budgeted for in the past. So there's an increased risk there. And I'm concerned that without the extra debt capacity.
So look, I think that all council understands absolutely those assumptions and those risks, but this loan facility is absolutely consistent with those assumptions. And I guess today those risks haven't changed from what you just described. But this loan agreement is giving effect to some of those core assumptions that you've agreed in the long-term plan. What I would say, Angela, is development contributions revenue will go up and down, different to what's in the long-term plan. But this facility, being an interest-free facility for 10 years, is the best way to mitigate the cost of providing infrastructure and getting the return back on it. Because as opposed to a normal loan, we don't have any holding cost for this because there's no interest cost. It's interest-free for 10 years. The holding cost for us occurs after 10 years. And so we've accepted through the 10-year plan we need to open up new growth areas. We've accepted that that's Peacocks. The interest-free loan provides us a level of mitigation around development contribution revenue that will go up and down through that period.
Okay. Well, just one last question, Mary Andrew, and then I'll see. I don't want to take up too much.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's important, and I'm happy for you just to clean up your set of questions.
On page, Blair, thank you. On page 566, point 42, it says the costs associated with these consulting contracts are included in the HIF. It should be noted the HIF includes projected expenditure of $16.7 million in 2018. So that's the first year of the LTP.
Correct.
I'm just a little unclear about that 16.4 million. So 4.1 is a drawdown from the loan, so the remaining 12.6 million is coming out of council coffers? No, I've read that wrong, haven't I? Can you explain that to me?
Can I maybe, Angela, take you? And I'm sorry, I don't have it's the very last page. It's the.
Yeah, I've got that. Yep.
Tab at the top of this. So I think that might help you.
Page 634.
Yeah. So what that's trying to show you here is a financial summary of the HIF project. So the top section, the very top line, and actually I've quoted the wrong number in my report there. We're spending $28.7 million in the first year, of which $16.7 million is loan, and $12.1 million is NZTA subsidy. So I've actually quoted the wrong number in my report. So Angela, we don't start to make repayments, you'll see in the orange section, until year 5. So the you referred to a number of $4 million. We're actually spending the very top line, 28 million, 56 million, 48 million, etc. per year, funded by NZTA subsidy and funded by the interest-free loan. So that's our gross expenditure at the top. The next section shows you the loan itself. And so if you look at the next section down, where there's an orange line, then a blue line, then a yellow line, that is showing you the loan as we start to draw the loan down. So we draw down $16 million in the first year, we draw down another $35 million in the second year. The loan builds up, and then we start to make repayments from year 5, and we repay $4.1 million year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, etc. So we have some very big expenditure occurring in the first 4 years of the program. The first year will be 2 parts, land acquisition and professional services. Year 2, 3 and 4 will be largely constructing the physical works, the road, the bridge, the pipes.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does help, thank you.
No, sorry, I quoted the wrong figure in that paragraph.
That's okay. So we have no, in reading the agreement, we have no ability for whatever reason to slow down projects. Now, what if we came across an archaeological site or something like that? How can we respond?
This is a committed facility, but you're not obligated to draw down on it. You could borrow nothing under here, or you could borrow the full 180 million. So your ability to change your projects can differ depending on time. The one impact will be is that you've got an agreed project timeline and those milestones. If for whatever reason, through your own fault or your own decision, you decide you miss one of those milestones by 2 years, then the government can stop funding. Because from their position, they want housing outcomes, and if you're 2 years late, then it's too much for them.
And all of the milestones, and this can be my last question, all of the milestones are around us delivering our strategic infrastructure. It's not at all relied on if developers decide to just sit back and wait and we've got empty land for several years.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. That'll do. Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor O'Leary has asked many of the questions that I had and done it very well, so I'm just trying to follow up a few strands from that, if I might, and just ask some slightly different questions as well. So you're talking about the development milestones and the government expecting housing outcomes. Did I hear you say to Councillor O'Leary just before that if the housing outcomes are not where we anticipate them to be, we can slow down our investment, slow down our draw on the fund? I mean, we don't want to have perched infrastructure, so if you see what I mean. If we
you have entire flexibility to stage your projects as you see fit. I mean, that will have ultimately an impact on your funding. The HIF loan the government can stop funding under the HIF loan if you're too far behind on your project timeline. You might decide to do that if you have a GFC or something like that.
So you'd have to have an ongoing conversation with government about what you're doing and what's the outcome of that is, because I mean we're all hopeful this is going to deliver houses, yeah,
True.
as quick as
But
possible.
Look, there's no link in this to actual housing outcomes. It's more that they're hoping. Everyone's hoping that if you build the core infrastructure, then
I don't
housing
like
will
that
be
word
built.
hope. It's a,
Expect.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think Councillor Porter, we go back to the whole intention of this was to bring the infrastructure forward, and in our case, at least 10 years to deliver houses, the opportunity for houses to be built more quickly, to provide more affordable housing choices. So that remains the core focus.
True, and we've I understand that, and we've also heard, though, haven't we, that there is some work that there is some housing yield that can occur in the wider Peacock area, not reliant on, say, the bridge. Like Adair did say that they could build potentially. I'm not going to get into arguments because consents would deal with that, but they said they potentially could do 1,000 houses without the bridge, for example. So that might delay us drawing down for the bridge, but you're saying we're going to be front-ending all of that anyway.
Look, our proposal is that on Monday we want to press go, and that is the second part of the recommendation here, that we want to delegate to the Chief Executive the ability to press go and to start the process, the tender process for those key design consulting elements. There is no reason for us not to move as fast as we can at the moment. Notwithstanding that, Councillor Paula, if in a year's time we see some signals where we may need to slow down, we would look at that. But at this stage,
but we'd already have an expensive bridge potentially. Anyway, no, sorry, that's more of a comment than a question. Apologise. That's fine. Thank you. I think I'll leave that one there. I also was wondering why it was drawn down in quarters rather than taking a just-in-time approach. Why you wouldn't match your drawdown to what you required at the time you needed it, but you did answered that, I think.
Yeah, I have answered.
Yeah. You said that government wouldn't agree to anything other than this. So, okay. The tender documents that you want to put out for transport and water, this obviously includes the bridge, because what you just most latterly said is that the physical roading and bridge is in year 3, 4? All going well?
Well, certainly all going well, sort of from year 2 to 4.
Okay.
But certainly the professional services includes road and bridge for transport.
Okay. I was concerned about the interest on that first portion, but you've answered that through Councillor O'Leary's questions. I'm satisfied with your answer on that one.
So you mentioned interest?
Just the fact that we're
the
front bit that until we get the right, yeah. So thank you. The last question for me at this time is two more. Sorry, the acquisition of properties. I presume that will be at market value, or what's the process to determine that? Because they'll be worth a lot more now, won't they?
I'll just get Andrew to answer that question. Andrew Parsons.
Yes, normally the properties would be acquired at market value, generally under a process set out in the Public Works Act, which is what council normally does for infrastructure-based land acquisitions anyway.
Right. So is it likely that those properties have now become more valuable, given that we need them?
Property values are changing all of the time across all of Hamilton. So I expect the property values will be shifting upwards as a result of this decision, but also as a result of just general market movement and inflation.
But it'd be hard to know the difference.
But I guess that's why I can't give you a number of the difference. But I guess that's why we want to go so quick into that property acquisition phase. So I've got teams on standby for next week, following council's decision if required. Okay.
So you think if you buy them nice and quickly, you can offset some of that ability to hold land until you absolutely need it, and therefore have that premium over it?
Yep. And we've also prioritised critical areas. So obviously land around the bridge is more important. And council owns a small amount of land out there already. Mm-hmm. Property is a key matter for us.
Yeah. Thank you. Last question is around the this page 634 was very useful. I would have liked to have seen on the same page some kind of, I know it's only best guess because you don't know what the yield is going to be, but I would like to have seen the, you've got the repayments from development contributions too, but I would have liked to have understood a projection in respect to yields and rates, because we've seen those, you recall those bar charts that we had in the lead up to the long-term plan, and there's some expectation that once you get a certain amount of houses, you'll start to get rates revenue. Can I understand where we could see both things in relation to each other?
Yes, I recall Stephen Halliwell did provide some information on that. So respect that, Paula. I guess I was focused purely on the HIF loan here as opposed to the wider economics. Certainly, if you go back to the detailed business case, a section of the detailed business case and the financials outlines the projected housing yield and development contributions revenue. So there is a section in the detailed business case. I just didn't feel it was appropriate to repeat all elements of those. No,
but I think they are, for me personally, I would have liked to have seen them connected.
Understand.
They are interconnected, really, and I think Councillor O'Leary made that point in her questions also. Thank you.
Mark, I'm just looking at very quickly page 561 F, the last of the paragraphs in the recommendation. Can you just describe a little bit what will be in that report? And it talks about reporting to the Finance Committee. So is it expected that it will that the Finance Committee is the appropriate place to be reporting this to?
Well, two parts to that, Gary. Yep. First part is Schedule 3 of the National Loan Facility Agreement in Appendix 1. And sorry, again, I don't have the page of Schedule 3, but that outlines the reporting requirements that the government have on an annual basis from us in terms of reporting on the loan agreement. So,
I have to be honest, so I haven't read that bit.
So there is a Schedule 3 of the agreement, so sorry I can't give you the page number. In terms of your question as to the form of the reports and should it come to Finance Committee, I'm mindful, page 604. I'm mindful that there is a separate report recommending that there's going to be a report coming to Finance Committee on all of our capital expenditure reporting, Councillor Gary.
Okay.
And that HIF obviously would be part of that more comprehensive report. And that's going to come to...
So this is just signalling that some reporting requirement needs to be in place.
Yes.
That has yet to be established what it will be.
Correct.
Although there is the reporting that's required by the HIF
government
process.
Yeah, so I think what I want to say is that Council staff are signalling a more comprehensive reporting regime is going to be coming to the Finance Committee in August, which would include all capital programs. This is part of that. But in addition to that more comprehensive reporting, there is specific HIF reporting required.
Ah, okay. So this HIF reporting that you're talking about here coming to Finance will be mixed in with Council's overall capital programming,
well, I think
which is the portfolio.
There's an opportunity there, Gary, to look at that and consider that as part of that.
Okay. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm looking at page 634, and I think I might know the answer, but I'm just sort of trying to get some clarity. Does it mean when you were looking at the repayments under the heading, under the line DCs, we have a fixed commitment to repay $4.1 million in year 5 and follows right through to year 10, $4.1 million fixed repayment each year, irrespective of how much we've collected in DCs on those properties?
Correct. So that was part of the negotiations with the government. So in the detailed business case, we'd identified when DCs were anticipated to be received, and we'd clearly shown that we would be receiving those from year 5. And we had a variable repayment of DCs, which moved slightly up and down. The government accepted that, but through this process said that they would prefer a fixed repayment as opposed to variable because, for a whole range of reasons, notwithstanding that the Cabinet decision was that they were seeking fixed repayments. And so what we agreed was that we would take the average of the repayments as per the detailed business case and average those for each of the tranches, and so that's what's reflected here. If you looked at the detailed business case, Rob, you would see that the calculation of the DC revenue was very, very conservative, and it was also based on the DC levies under the old policy, not the new policy. So again, they were significantly lower than we anticipated. And in addition, we had said that any DCs collected from years 1 to 4, in fact right through to 30th of June 2023, we kind of discounted those in terms of not being available to repay HIF. The reality will be that we will be collecting some DCs, particularly of the likes of, say, the Adair Group. So that money would go into our jam jar effectively and would reduce debt ahead of this, would reduce our normal debt. And so my feeling is that we've been quite conservative here in terms of our fixed repayments.
But this wasn't a commitment that we knew about in the December business case. This is something that the government have come in since and said, well, you know, I'm guessing here, but they're saying, oh, here's an opportunity for us to get some money back sooner than the 10-year promise of each drawdown.
No, we absolutely knew, and we modelled and we presented in the detailed business case repayments in exactly this form from year 5 in the detailed business case. So I'm looking at the page right now. And the quantum is exactly the same. So if you looked at the quantum of the repayments across each 5-year tranche, it's exactly the same. It's just that we've averaged them as opposed to them going slightly up and down by a couple of $100,000 per year.
Okay. So in essence, it's not a 10-year interest-free loan, is it? Because we're paying some of it back. In fact, we're paying 40 million of it back. No, sorry, 20 million of it back. Is there 5 there? Yeah, 6. We're paying $24 million of it back within the 10 years of each drawdown.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
So I guess the risk for us is if we don't receive the DCs in each of those years, we're going to have to, and I think Angela may have touched on this, we have to actually go and borrow the shortfall to make up whatever we've collected,
that is
4 million less whatever we've collected.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And I guess, Rob, just on that point, offsetting that risk, because I mean that's an absolutely, it's a risk that's worth noting, is that one of the benefits of the interest-free HIF loan is that it allows you to build through different economic cycles, and so
I understand that, and I understand that as perhaps the biggest advantage, rather than saving on the interest. Because if we knew for certain that we could sell all the sections as quick as they became available, then we probably wouldn't need an interest-free loan. Yeah, okay. I think Paula may have touched on this. It would be useful to see in this, and this is a really good table. It would be useful to see from your business case, which I did not go back and look at when I had to read these 1,500 pages over the last week of this in the earlier meeting. It would be useful to see where we might land in 2038 in terms of how much we will still need to borrow based on those projections that you've got in the business plan to fund the fact that we will have repaid all of the HIF loan, and how much, how much we've collected in DCs of the 180 million, less how much we now need to pay interest on. And we will have started doing that anyway, as each 10-year point is reached. But it would be useful to see where we've actually landed year by year in terms of that additional borrowing.
Yes. I think the one answer I'd give here today, Rob, is our business case was extremely conservative on our anticipated repayment, as you can imagine why. But I would expect, as part of the report that Gary talked about, that we would want to track the actual revenue pertaining to the Peacock sale as an interesting piece of information that helped us understand how we were going against our fixed repayments versus what we'd already collected. So, And I think the second part of that is we've talked about before potentially the need for a targeted rate to address any consents.
I saw that.
So that would be the second leg of that equation. So it may be a combination of DC revenue and targeted rates that forms our revenue source to repay back.
Is it easy in terms of analysing the DC calculation? And might need the DC guys here for this, and you might not be able to answer it. Is it easy? Let's say we got 40,000 DC on a section. Is it relatively easy to calculate how much of that DC relates to this subdivision cost, as opposed to a portion of the DC which would be for citywide infrastructure?
My understanding is that they will be able to identify the portion of DC that relates to the projects.
Yeah, to the projects in here.
Yeah.
Okay,
which is exactly kind of what we did when we go into. If you look back to the detailed business case, that's what our detailed business case was representing.
Yep. What
portion of the DCs that we are theoretically going to collect relate to the HIF projects?
Okay.
And it's only that portion we anticipated that we'd pay to the government.
Okay.
Well, based on the
projections.
Yeah. No.
So the loan document refers to a debenture, which is something that I haven't seen for a few years, because I gather that they're not as much in favour as... is the debenture that the government, and presumably the government will be registering some sort of debenture on a formal agreement to recognise this loan, is that debenture a negotiable instrument where government...
This is the thing that's 100 years old. It's your debenture trustee, which you already have in place. So all your LGFA borrowings are secured by rates revenue under your debenture trustee. And this loan is going to be secured on exactly the same basis.
But it will be with the New Zealand government and not with LGFA.
Correct. So you'll give a security stock certificate to the Crown.
Yeah. So could the government go and on-sell that debenture? Is it? I mean, it would be in the deed, wouldn't it, as to whether or not it's a negotiable instrument?
You'd have to look to see whether it can be assigned.
Okay. If they could, is there potentially a legal risk to the city if we found that the debenture was owned by...
just don't default.
Some finance company or loan shark.
It's governed by... You can only collect it under your security if you default under the loan.
Okay, so the loan agreement would stay in place,
of course,
in terms of what we had negotiated with the government.
That's right. So the debenture secures the obligations under this. So if you pay everything under this, you can't exercise security.
Can I just take another angle to that, Councillor Rob, because I think there's probably a more interesting angle to that, which is we have preserved the ability for council to repay the HIF loan at any time in full.
Yeah, early. I saw that in the agreement.
So I think that's a more likely scenario, that if for some reason there was a different deal available, let's assume a deal that was even better than what we have in front of us, then council could, if we were able to be successful under that arrangement, repay this and use that new arrangement.
Okay.
So if there was some, for example, off-balance sheet arrangement. So we've preserved, and that's probably a more feasible scenario if we could make that stand up.
Okay. I got a little bit confused over some figures. In paragraph 24 on page 564, we talk about the NZTA subsidy of $110 million, I should say. And on page 628, there's a letter from NZTA indicating $234 million. I see they've got the 100, and then they've got 119 being, which is still different from the 110.
I'm going to answer this.
Is there a kind of a reconciliation in there?
There's an absolutely very logical answer to that.
I'm sure there is.
It's all related to the great work that Mr Parsons did here with the Cobham Drive interchange and the extra subsidy.
I figured that might have been in there somewhere, yes.
Clarify?
So the figures in the letter from, the figures in the letter from NZTA and Parakawhia predate the opportunity to cost share the ring road interchange on Cobham Drive. So as part of winning an additional 43% cost share from the state highway arm of NZTA and government have then reduced the NZTA share for the HIF loan accordingly. So that's why there's a difference.
So that $9 million is essentially the difference.
So
they've given us 18 and taken 9 off.
That's right, because for the ring road, the costs come down, the total cost comes down by 18, but 50% of it's subsidy, so that gets you to 9, and then they've redacted the the loan and the subsidy in the HIF area by the same amount of money.
I figured you wouldn't have got. I figured you wouldn't have got the arithmetic wrong, and that it just okay. And one last question, which is a pretty simple one, is in the motion, in the staff recommendation, it talks about the B1 talks about any final changes to the loan facility agreement. Do you anticipate any changes, given that it appears to me, that the whole agreement has been a bit of a moving target since we first started, and I'm not blaming the government on this, but it's new to them too, and I would assume so. And I'm probably answering my question. If there were any significant changes, Mark would be coming back to us through you guys with.
Yeah, so the answer is no. We are at now the stage where we actually understand the final form of the agreement. So when I completed this report last week, there were still a couple of elements that we were just working through. The one significant gap was the milestones section. I've advised that we've since populated that part of the agreement, which is quite simply, Council, a list of the key elements of the project and the start and anticipated start and finish dates. They are exactly as per a Gantt chart that was in the detailed business case. But Mark can also give you the advice, but certainly we're at a position now where we have sent the final version to MB, and they have agreed that effectively those are the last of the changes. So I think, Councillor Rob, we have been the first council all the way through this process, sort of completing the documentation. So we've been pushing.
We've been the pioneers of it.
Correct, correct. But I'll let Mark just give you some comfort as well around this.
Yeah, no, it's materially complete. I mean, they have to add their email address and notice details, but we're down to brass tacks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. The progress report requirements to the government, what's the frequency of those? Are they quarterly as well?
Yearly.
They're yearly, okay. And that would be where we would indicate, because that would be where we would indicate the world has suddenly changed for us, whatever that might be. And in terms of we have to report on significant or emerging risks, the projects, obviously market conditions, changes to zonings and all of those kinds of things. So would that be the first indication? Because I notice, answer that question first.
Yes and no is probably the answer. In my report, I refer to governance arrangements for the HIF program, and as part of our business case, we promoted that NZTA and MB should have representation on our project governance group. So they have certainly accepted that position, and so we would expect that as part of good program management, good project management, that all those issues would be canvassed on a very regular basis. So if there was anything such as what you talked about, Angela, they would be talked about well in advance of any formal report such as this. They'd be addressed at the project level, and I would expect that through the project governance, issues such as that would be addressed back up through the respective organisations as early as possible if there were issues such as you described.
And how, yeah, that
does that give you some comfort?
It certainly gives me some comfort. And how often is that? Because I think the mayor or his nominee, MB staff, is that right? Someone sits on that governance?
No, this is
separate. This is separate.
So again, it's an executive team governance structure. So it's part of Jean Baird, GM City Growth, in terms of her responsibilities, part of Chris Allen, part of his new responsibilities, and other respective staff, along with a senior NZTA and a senior MB official as part of that. So, and there'll be a finance person as part of that governance. So we're just in the process of getting that group established and the appropriate structures underneath that. There's quite a detailed structure there.
So a final question, and incredibly critical, that I'm absolutely 100% clear on this so I can make an informed decision. In the agreement, on page 581, 3.2, under facility availability and drawings, the voluntary reduction of unused facility limit, that is backing up, Blair, what you said, because I was under the impression right through this journey that we would put $180.3 million on the city books. But actually, that's not what the agreement, or I think your previous answer to my question. At any time, we can, for whatever reason, if we had to, we can stop work because we can stop drawing down the loan. Is that correct? Because in terms of managing risk, that's a fundamentally different proposition than what I had in my head.
You've got absolutely no obligation to borrow anything under here.
Which means at any time, if the world changed for us, however it would, earthquake, developers all left and moved to Tauranga, we can stop. Okay. Significantly piece of information.
I think the other thing, Angela, I would just note is that probably associated with that question, today, if you approve the recommendations, you delegate Richard to give effect to some consulting arrangements. At a separate time in the future, you'll be asked to consider and approve some construction contracts in relation to
of course.
So that's another point in time where council can assess and associate with the staff, are you prepared to award the construction contracts, which are spending more money under this arrangement? So again, that's another governance decision point in that process.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much, Mayor Andrew. Look, I'm just picking up on something that you said before, Blair, and you sounded very positive, but I just wanted to see whether you've got anything there substantial. You talked about possibly paying the loan off even earlier. What could you base that on?
What I was referring to there, Councillor Siggy, was if there was a different method of funding infrastructure in this growth area that was available to council, and ultimately council were of a mind to enter into that structure, that we could replace this facility with that new structure. So government, for example, is talking about off-sheet funding of infrastructure, off-balance sheet funding of infrastructure. If that was available to us, if the business case stacked up, if the government made us the offer, I would like the ability to say, thank you, we'll pay back the HIF and take that new offer instead.
Oh, I see, that way. So it wasn't about building faster houses, getting more DC, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, I think if we built houses faster, got more DCs, we don't have to pay this loan back any quicker.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would suggest that council may want to not pay the loan back any faster because it's interest-free money.
Sure.
So you would just want to keep that money in the bank.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Mayor Andrew, just to follow on from that line of questioning that Councillor O'Leary just completed. So I understand you're quite clear that we could stop at any time. But my concern is at what point, because we're front-ending some quite large bits of the expenditure, the bridge, the water, the roads, At what point then would it become a ridiculous decision to stop because you lose all the cost benefit of your previous investment? Do you know what I mean? It's all very well to say we could stop, but we'd have this humongous expensive bridge and water plant and 200 houses when we expected 10,000 houses. What then?
Yeah, so
is there a point?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there, with any infrastructure construction decision that we make, Councillor Paula, there is that same consideration. At this time, you know, council following today would be committing itself to spending monies on consultants, design work. That work will be relevant and applicable even if there was a delay, because we need to do the detailed design work, we need to do the detailed engineering work. One would suggest that once you start building the bridge and the road, you'll build the whole thing, because you don't build half a bridge, you don't build half a road.
Yeah.
But I also remind council that, again, this facility is designed to build for growth for the next, probably the next cycle. It's a 5-year construction timeframe. There is going to be some ups and downs in terms of the economy. The interest-free component of the loan is designed specifically to help councils bridge that funding gap in terms of not being exposed to interest cost while we build the infrastructure, ready for when it's needed in 5 years down the track. So undoubtedly there are going to be times where demand will be less, but bearing in mind we're looking to deliver infrastructure ready to be available in 5 years' time, not for tomorrow.
No, I do understand that. That's the nature of my question, though. We've got to measure the overall risk of not achieving the outcomes, the housing outcomes that we were intending to achieve with the project. As soon as that bridge goes in, and other bits, we need to drive growth to get a cost benefit from that investment, don't we?
Absolutely, and I think that's the entire long-term plan that Council's just signed off. It's a key assumption, the growth assumptions. Our capital expenditure program responds to that. All the evidence is that the assumptions are the most accurate that we have, your next decision point, Council, following today will be when staff come back to you in due course to say we are now ready to proceed to the next stage of the project, which is to go through the construction element, and I'm sure at that stage Council will want to understand the relevant information around demand and balance sheets, bits and pieces before we make that final commitment.
So will we know at that stage? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. My thoughts going. Carry on.
I was just going to say the other thing to note here is that NZTA's $110 million subsidy, which is also a key part of this facility, has been brought forward over 10 years. So at every decision point and in the future when Council stands back and looks at the next decisions around awarding construction tenders, Council also needs to be mindful that at this stage they say no and they just decline or slow down, that funding from NZTA may be placed at risk as well and may not be available in the future. So those are all key considerations that Council needs to be aware of.
Yeah, no, I understand those.
This facility is not designed to be deferred indefinitely. It's designed to be given effect to now, that's the agreement with the government, and to proceed at absolute pace to construct the infrastructure, which is the reason why, again, our delegation is the Chief Executive.
Yeah, so then it comes back to how do we in a timely fashion get the assurance that we need that the housing yield makes this investment worthwhile? Is it a pace and type to make this worthwhile as soon as possible? Do you see where I'm sitting?
Yes, I do, and I think this is part of the team that's going to be put around the housing, the Peacock delivery. There's going to be, as I said, a governance structure put in place. There's going to be a team specifically set up to deliver Peacocks. And delivering Peacocks is more than just building infrastructure. It's working with the development community. It's working with the developers to get agreements. It's fast-tracking the consenting processes. It's looking at the structure, the master plans for the cell. It's looking at the environmental roadblocks in terms of any resource consent mitigation issues to make sure that we give effect to all of this, the entire package, as quickly as possible. I mean, the business case wasn't just about building infrastructure. The business case was the role of the Peacock's growth cell for the city, for the sub-region. There was housing, there was benefits, etc. Well beyond that. So we've got to deliver a complete package.
So I get that. We've heard all that messaging for some time now. So the first part, which is all the design and that work that goes on in the first couple of years, at the end of that, before a spade goes in, a digger goes in, to do this first shovel to create the bridge, we'll be in a much better position to understand how many properties we've purchased, what yield is likely to come, what plans the developers have, what agreements we have with developers. We will know then.
Yes.
Before an expensive bridge is complete, we will know, or we will be in a much better position.
We will certainly have a lot more information than we do today.
We will have a lot more information.
But it's also quite conceivable at that time, Councillor Paula, that the economy may be in a different position to today. And I guess I just remind Council again that this infrastructure has not been built for today or 2 years' time. It's been built to be ready in 5 years' time. And so there are going to be ups and downs in that period. And so this is looking to the long term, opening that next major growth area for the city.
Yeah. I just hope you can understand where my questions come from. I need to be assured of what risk I'm taking on and when I'm taking it on.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. You mentioned something there about paying back the loan earlier if, you know, by chance they change the mechanism and we can take it off our books, etc. In all likelihood, really? Are they going to do that? I mean, why would they? I mean, they've got pretty good conditions from us so far.
Look, I'm not suggesting that's available to us today, Councillor Mark, but the government absolutely understand the challenges of high growth councils. They understand that our balance sheets are absolutely at capacity, and that they are wanting to work with the Mayor, Richard, myself, to look at all and every opportunity to help us take pressure off our balance sheet. So we are actively making those conversations happen, and they are actively listening. Whether there's anything available to us yet to be determined, but we're certainly raising it.
So we had a conversation with Minister Twyford on Monday, and the essence of that conversation was that you know, off-balance sheet items is suitable for new things that we haven't funded yet, but it might also give us capacity on our balance sheet for the existing infrastructure that we're going to be building that's already in our 10-year plan, including the HIF, to enable us to gain capacity in other areas so that we can use our balance sheet to fund other things as well. So it's very much a conversation they listen to, and it's very much a conversation that we push quite hard. And I'm about to send a letter to the Crown Infrastructure Partners to effectively note our interest to pursue for an off-balance sheet item for other areas of the city, including for peacocks. No guarantees, but we'll keep every opportunity and push along.
Right, so you're suggesting that might be more useful in other things other than peacocks?
Well, balance sheet capacity in general means that we have the ability to make bigger decisions in different areas. Just gives us flexibility. At the moment, we're very low on flexibility, which is the point I made on Tuesday. And if we can gain greater flexibility in our balance sheet through off-balance sheet items, then that gives us greater decision-making ability.
Okay, thank you. And a while ago we were talking about with the NZTA subsidy, we were getting it brought forward on the condition that we asked or we got less subsidy in the future for our other projects. Is that right? Do you remember? We were going to pay it back by not getting such a big subsidy. Where's that gone? That was
at the very, very early stage of the 2 years ago kind of discussion. That's completely off the table. So we didn't want that type of an arrangement. Gone.
Right. That's
cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so questions over. We'll move into debate. Okay, there is no debate. Yes, it was moved by myself. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. So Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, it's been 2 years, I think staff said, to get to this point, and Blair, I do want to commend you and the team. This has been a plethora of information and reading since we started this journey, and the information has been consistent. I am nervous about this project. And actually, since my time on council, I do believe that Councillor McPherson and myself, way back possibly in 2007 or 8, were lone voices for peacocks. And so this is an audacious goal for the city. There's a lot of unknown factors, and I'm a little nervous when I think I lived through the GFC here and the impact that had. I think the loan agreement is certainly from the government something that I can live with. I think it's something that the city can live with. And in terms of managing risk for the city, I am very comfortable that if for whatever reason the world changes, heaven forbid we have another global financial crisis, we hit peak oil, who knows what in the future, because this is a very long-term project and majority of us possibly will not be here when this is completed, that there is a level of comfort, a great level of comfort actually for me, that we have manoeuvrability in this in terms of the finances and the numbers going onto our books, and in terms of being a little bit nimble with the projects and how we deliver them and how we respond to many things that affect our economic environment, which are completely out of control. So based on those principles, and thank you again, seriously, and also to the leadership, CEO, you and the Mayor have driven this project, and Mayor Andrew, I'm speaking to you. I want to thank you for the work that you've done with the Minister and the Ministry. I'm very happy to support the recommendation.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I would also echo Councillor Angela's comments in terms of the work that Blair and his team and the rest of the organisation has put into advancing this project. I guess the devil will always be in the detail, and it's been interesting, and given that we appear to have been a pioneer council in getting the details sorted, it's a pity in some ways that we weren't able to get a different loan structure than the one different way of receiving the funds, but not necessarily having on our balance sheet, because I think in terms of while this is what local government's all about, creating living space and workspace for our residents, this project is fraught with some significant financial risks. And we only need to look at the fact that currently our debt is $358 million. This project, the 180 from the HIF and the extra 45 that we have to borrow to get Peacock underway, is a 60% increase in our current debt. So, you know, we're looking at moving our debt up to nearly $600 million as a result of this single project. And of course, if you go back through the 10-year plan, we've got a number of other projects that are going to also push our debt well beyond that $600 million over the next 10 years. So this is big stuff, and this is probably the area that I'm focusing on will be the legacy, whether it's good or bad, that will come from this. And I think this council have in recent years become a little bit shy of big financial risk, given some of the actions that happened around the V8s and elsewhere. I think, though, in terms of accountability, what we need to do is we need to be all over this project for the next 3 to 4 years. And when I say all, need to be not only management but also governance, and we need to be nimble right across the organisation, and it was touched on earlier in terms of the reporting that will come back on this project to the Finance Committee. We need to have good lines of reporting, accurate lines of reporting, understandable lines of reporting, so that we all know what's going on, and that's not just in the financial incomes. The financial outcomes. We also need to be nimble and aware of what the emerging risks are. And I think Councillor Angela touched on that around emerging financial recessions. Hopefully not another GFC, but certainly we will, over the life of this project, experience financial recessions, which will slow down the demand and still leave us exposed to financial costs, leave the rest of the city taxpayers, ratepayers, exposed to financial costs for maintaining this growth cell. I will be supporting it, and again thank the team for the work that they've done to date on this.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Look, I reiterate the comments of my colleagues around the amount of work that staff have done. Thank you for taking us on this journey. I do accept we need growth. That's fundamental. And I accept that it's got to go somewhere. I do remain concerned, however, about the risks in this project. And I think my questioning before will indicate that I'm concerned that we won't get the yield that we expect to get as soon as we would like to get it, and therefore get the revenue. I'm concerned that because it's a golden egg now, that we might not necessarily get the best deal we can out in the market. And I remain concerned that we might not get the diversity type of affordable housing that we need. And I've said that from the very beginning. I want not just a number of houses, I want diverse houses appropriate to the needs of the city. But I am going to support this. I have sympathy for Rotokauri, I do, because once upon a time, they were the favoured ones and believed that a swale was coming their way. And they thought about and planned for their investment when that swale would be delivered. And of course now they can say goodbye to those plans because that swale is not coming anytime soon. So, you know, you can understand how they feel about that. I also am a big fan of infill housing and the special housing areas, because I think they've got the ability to get things underway now. As soon as those special housing areas are approved, it's good to go. Infill's there right for the picking right now, and people are you know, the infill's doing quite well. I think government needed to step in more strongly to contribute to solving what is actually New Zealand's housing crisis. This has arisen because of New Zealand's need for housing around economic parts of the country. And so New Zealand's housing crisis is Central North Island's crisis, which is our housing crisis. And we've got to remember that a loan is just a loan, and it will have to be paid back. One other thing, of course, that I've spoken up for from the very beginning, and I caution councillors to remember that this loan does take up, for a while until we can repay it, quite a large portion, as Councillor Pascoe said, of our debt capacity. That's just a fact. And so that leaves us less space to build other community assets, wider community assets. And we've felt that squeeze in our deliberations on the long-term plan. What can we realistically afford? And I'll just make this point because I've made it before I was elected, and every chance I can since, that a good city needs good community assets. So I remain concerned about things like playgrounds and parks and libraries and pools and turfs. We can't just build a bigger city. We've actually got to have a quality of city where people want to live, and all of those community assets are very much at the heart of quality in my view. But, you know, look, I've got my head in a bag. I do know that we've got to do something proactive around housing, and notwithstanding my cautions, I'm going to support it, a little reluctantly, but I will.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you. Look, if this HIF gets approved today, which looking at the numbers, I think it's going to, it's a big moment in Hamilton's history. And through this process, which hasn't come easy, we've got a mechanism to provide 8,500 houses for the city, to unlock a growth cell, which I think Hamilton needed, which was basically in the too hard basket for 20 odd years. The HIF isn't the perfect deal. We would have liked more in some ways, you know, for the debt to be off the balance sheet, for instance, but it's still a damn good deal for the city. And the free loan reduces the risk of that investment, although I accept that there will always be an element of risk. No one can see the future. Overall, I'm satisfied. A massive amount of work has gone into this project. A lot of questions all the way through. A lot of questions today, really good ones. And as Councillor Pascoe says, it's you know, councillors governance as well as staff need to be heavily involved in this. And in terms of staff, it's been, to me, it appears to have been the most thorough, painstaking, important work that our council staff probably must have just about ever done. And I think we should take pride in the fact that we were the first council in New Zealand to submit a detailed business case. In approving this, I congratulate Richard and his team for delivering on this. It's been a massive commitment, a massive project. But I think today, voting against this, it would be at this stage a do-nothing option, and to me, that's not an option. We need houses. It's core business for this council, providing infrastructure, and voting against this, you just don't get those houses, and we need them. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, obviously we've noted the praise of the hard-working staff and the work, and that is supported. I want to obviously commend the three key elected members, and sorry if I miss anyone out. Obviously that's yourself, Your Worship, and also the Chair and Deputy of the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, the incredible work you've done. From time to time, as you know, I wander around my colleagues' social media pages, had a look at what they're saying in the video, and I did catch a video from Councillor Taylor saying what we had done, and he was giving some constructive criticism, but it was a pre-election video. So take that video down now, replace it. That we've done far more than nothing. We've done a whole lot of stuff. Get that video down. I just also want to say that in addition, if you like, to the people who've been doing that work with Wellington, the important part of this process have been the hard questions, the critics, and in that sense I acknowledge Councillor Leary and Councillor Pascoe, because I think through this process it is all about due diligence. It's about governance, really putting every aspect of this through the ringer, so to speak. And I've actually got to say, believe it or not, I want to take Councillor Pascoe and get a transcript of his contribution now, because basically he's given a very good analysis of what the governance structure needs to be like and what our regular monitoring needs to be like, and what the early signals and early warnings, etc. are there, because obviously we cannot predict the economic future in terms of potential global financial crisis or a mini version of that, and how that looks. I will say, however, that if you look at historically, I think the terms of this development are far better than when the previous council embarked on a courageous development of North Hamilton in terms of Flagstaff and Rototuna. I think these are the financials of this are done in far more favourable circumstance, and one of the advantages, of course, of quickening the transition to capital value is that we do capture and have a fair rating system where the inhabitants of Peacocks obviously will be paying their way in a better way. I think the other issue, and I think the key word was being nimble, and it's actually, so to me the success or failure of this from our point of view, as Councillor Pascoe mentioned, will be the quality of our governance and the quality of the reports, and also I think I want to praise both governments and both sets of MPs. Most MPs were enthusiastic, with one possible exception, for this particular project. But I think that relationship is, again, it's a great, huge example where the official to official relationship between Hamilton and Wellington is critical, and I think a huge example where we actually get alongside our members of the Parliament, make sure that they are embraced and we have them on our team. And I just want to say to Jamie Strange and Tim McIndoe in particular, we thank you, those two MPs, for being a very important, integral part of the Hamilton team. And to me, on this issue, it's been good as sitting around this table. Finally, I would make the point, and I'll take 2 more sentences, but I've got a minute left anyway, that if we did nothing, you know, we have competitor cities in essence. Tauranga, huge high growth area, and we shouldn't underestimate the challenges facing the Waikato and Waipa, and obviously there are other alternatives for this growth. So I think Hamilton, I think Paula talked about the infill and this type of things. To me, it's just a whole range of things in the toolbox that makes housing more affordable and more available, and options there. And we're doing our bit, hopefully, to ensure that what we call the Kiwi dream can be realised by this newer generation who are really up against it in this area. So fingers crossed this will achieve what we all want to achieve, and that is to land a lot of people in different ways, what I call the Kiwi dream, and to make sure that we're right up there with our competitor and complementary city, Tauranga and Auckland. We are in the high growth triangle, and like it or not, we have to respond to that.
Councillor Mark Bunting.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I really hope my kids get to hear this, because it's for them and it's about them. And that's Penny, Daisy and Max, and I love them dearly. It should come as no surprise to anyone who's listened to my concerns and debates over the past 18 months that I'm now going to withdraw my support for this arrangement and vote against our commitment to the HIF. I don't want to, but I have to. 2 years ago, I was sitting with some very trusted individuals, and we were entertaining the idea of me being mayor. We were testing ideas with the public, and we were polling very, very well. There were some great ideas that resounded, and they resounded strongly, and they were a caring city, a smart city, a happy, healthy Hamilton. And that is my dream for Hamilton, a happy, healthy Hamilton. Now, if you look at anything that's happy and healthy, it grows up. It grows up tall and strong with a big heart. Healthy things don't grow out too fast. So I stood on that platform, grow up, not out. And due to circumstances I've forgiven but not forgotten, I decided not to run for mayor rather than for council. Here. But I remained true to that platform of a happy, healthy Hamilton. The city with a strong heart that grows up and not out. But lo and behold, I was elected into a council with a mayor who was elected and stood on greenfield growth, and true to his word has worked tirelessly to secure the deal of the century, and it is a great deal. And to their immense credit, the staff have pulled rabbits out of every available hat to bid for the $1 billion infrastructure fund, and they won, and won handsomely. And I'm enormously impressed with this team, best team in the country, to my mind. But they were working on something that went in quite a different direction to the way I wanted to go. But I believe if you want to change something, you need to work with people from inside. And I've politely and obligingly worked very hard to stay in this dance for the longest possible time. But my concerns are too strong, and my concerns are twofold. One, grow up and not out. And two, it's the debt level for me. I believe that it is a tempting offer. It is a great offer, but to my mind, not all tempting offers are right. And as we get to this point, it doesn't feel right. It's too much debt. It takes us to our overdraft limit, and it will. And when you're at that point, you are too vulnerable. I have looked for options to build up and out to reconcile this in my mind and my heart. But if we're spending all our money on out, there's no more for up. And I want to go up. And up is expensive as well. But that's the direction I think we should go. We asked for a better deal, as Blair said, and they came back with no. We asked to be taken off the books. They said no. We asked for a higher subsidy on the bridge. Nah. It's a generous offer, take it or leave it, they said, and I'm sorry, but for me it's thanks, but no thanks. Peacocks is beautiful land. I believe it will be developed, but just not yet. Southern Links is vital to the central government, but you know what? I actually think it's more vital to them than it is to us. And maybe the staff and councillors know something that I don't and are prepared to take this risk, but for me, I'm not. I've tried really hard to be supportive, and I will remain supportive, whatever happens in this debate, which I think I can foresee the outcome. But I won't be submissive. Too much debt for me, and it's out, not up this way. Now, I've got 3 beautiful, proud Hamilton children, and I've always told them to hold their head up high and to grow up, to be wise, to be prudent, and to be strong. And today, kids, Dad's heeding his own advice. I love the city, and I am now one of the city fathers. So I'm giving Hamilton some advice. Grow up. Let's be smart, be prudent, and be wise. Let's not be tempted by great deals and fast money. They'll make you weak and poor. Follow this advice and you'll grow up and not out. So I say respectfully to the central government, thank you but no thank you. Hamilton will decide when we grow, Wellington won't. We'll decide when and how we'll grow. Councillors, we can say no to this and move our focus to a strong and vibrant city centre with tall, beautiful buildings, wonderful, bold architecture, great community infrastructure, places where people can walk to anything they need, grab public transport to go to wherever they want, and they can drive out of town anytime they choose. But just like the proud and wonderful cities around Europe, Asia and America, Hamilton actually too can be tall and we can be strong. That's the city I'm dreaming of. We can have a great heart and we can be a great river city, the greatest river city in the world to work, play in, live and visit. And sometimes the bravest call is to say no, to decide that we're going that way and not out. I want the city to grow up, I really do. Spend our money on the things that are good for our heart, not that make us grow wide. So Penny, Daisy and Max, grow big, tall and strong. Be strong of heart and true. Hamilton, please grow up, not out. Stand tall, be strong and wise. You know, ironically, just finally, if you look at obesity figures and the same for ill health, you'll see the prevalence in poorer areas. My concern, and my deep concern, is that if we take the sweetheart deal, we will be in record debt. We will be that poor area that grew out when we could have grown up. But I don't think I'm going to win.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, I've got some excellent news for my good friend Councillor Ubuntu over there. Hamilton is growing up faster and more than any other city or town in New Zealand. 57% infill growth in the last year versus, I think it was 17% our near neighbours Tauranga. I think you've got to our planners, you've got to the developers with your ideas. We're doing it already. One of the problems is that we've only got about 13 years left of the up. We need some out that eventually can go up as well. And so it needs to be balanced. And all up won't cut the mustard, nor will all out. We've got a balance. We've got the best balance in New Zealand. And I think, Councillor Ubuntu, you would want your kids to be well balanced as well as tall. And that's what I'm suggesting you can do here. And notwithstanding the fact that Peacock is in the West Ward, I will continue to support your East Ward projects like we have at Rotuna and that, but we need it across the whole city, not just the development in the middle of the town and the far northeast. I largely agree, especially with the points of Councillor Leary, and I was going to say Councillor Taylor as well, but I must have a look at that video before I say I support that too much. Look, Councillor Paula, you mentioned Rotokauri being a bit sad about that. Its time will come. In fact, its time has already come. That's why we've got an application for up to 2,000 housing lots and an SHA up there. That's why we have not taken the first no from the central government for the support for the swale there as their final answer. We're certainly going back to them and have continued to go back to them about that, and I'm pretty sure that eventually we'll get some movement in that area as well, and Rotokauri will still develop as also. I might also add here, just to bring in a slightly extraneous matter, that I'm very glad we've included the full transport improvement project, because with all the growing up and the growing out we're doing at the moment, we're certainly going to need a much better transport system, looking at some of the congestion and safety figures that I've seen from around the city. The final thing I'd want to say is that one of the really important things in council is that you try and stick to the deals and promises you've made. And in 1989, when a very young Councillor Gallagher was still on council, this council promised to develop peacocks. It's taken, 29 years, but we're finally going ahead and doing that. So thank you, Councillor Gallagher, for that great foresight your council showed back then, and I hope that in another 29 years it's completely full and we've moved on to developing Tamahiri and some of those other areas that will be coming into the city.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you very much, and I join with everyone who's thanked the staff. The work you guys have put in has been extraordinary, and thank you very, very much. I will be supporting this. This is exactly what the council should be doing. This is a very clear example of what I consider to be core business for a city council. So you've got no argument will be there. I accept there is risk, and a number of you have raised the issues with risk, and I accept also that no amount of work that Blair and his team can do can eliminate the risk. There are lots of things that we do not have control over. But there is one thing that we do have some control over, and I just wish we had applied a greater and a stronger approach to reducing our expenses, because we don't have to borrow for this. We wouldn't have to borrow for this if we hadn't made poor decisions in the past, which had generated deficits and caused us to increase our debt. We would not have to be going to cap in hand to the government if we hadn't made decisions a long, long time ago that have accumulated debt over time, accumulated debt where our expenses overran our income, and we would have been in a situation where we might have had to get half this loan or something like that. We could have even got a loan from the bank, the normal way you do it. But unfortunately, we haven't this council and previous councils haven't seen it that way, and we've kept on. We've kept on trying to have everything. You can't have the growth and a whole lot of expenditure, which is not providing good value for money, which is what I think we have done. And I think that if you have a hard look at our expenses, there's a lot of real easy pickings in there, which would actually de-risk the whole process for everyone. If suddenly we got a bit gutsy and cut some of our expenses, and suddenly we were making real surpluses, suddenly the whole debt profile of this whole thing goes down. But anyway, even though that doesn't look like we're going to do that, I still will be supporting the HIF loan and the HIF agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, Andrew, I wasn't going to speak to this. And in fact, I came along here today pretty sure that I was going to support this HIF application. But listening to Councillor Bunting, I thought, yeah, he's pretty much on the button. And I asked myself the question is, why are we taking this good agricultural land out there to build houses on? The other day, what did? We approved the Te Awa Lakes project to move down to onto the Minister. And I just wonder, how many houses do we need? Everybody tells me that we've got a housing shortage. And yet, I go over there onto just off Wariri Drive, and I see all these house and land packages which are available for sale. Everything, as far as I'm concerned in life, is pretty cyclical. I can see at the present time, of course, we've got interest rates which are starting to climb. And in another 5 years' time, will we be back to mortgages at around 9–10%? We don't know for sure, but the signals out of the United States, of course, it looks like it's going to happen. And as we all know, that's all we do, is we do follow the rest of the world around the place. So I'm sort of thinking this risk is, I'm probably very risk adverse, there's no two ways about that, and I fully admit that. And as a result of that, of course, I am not going to support the motion.
This started in this room when this council submitted on the Productivity Commission's Housing Affordability Report. We suggested 10-year interest-free loans should be offered to councils to open up new growth sales like Peacock subdivision. This led to the national government's $1 billion HIF, Housing Infrastructure Fund for Growth Councils. After lobbying with the government of the day, we achieved more than our share with $180 million over 10 years on an interest-free loan to open up Peacock. That included building a new road over our river, a new overpass over Cobbin Drive, a new spine road right through the middle of the subdivision, a sewerage pipe to come out piping the sewerage for 7.5 kilometres to connect to our existing wastewater pipes. Then there was a change of government, unexpectedly, and we lost our open door, and we couldn't get past the Minister's Secretary. Of course, being a new government, they were very busy and they were setting new direction. So the Chief Executive, Richard, and myself would fly to Wellington to attend cocktail parties, to connect and make new relationships with the new ministers of the Labour government. Thank you specifically to Councillor Dave McPherson, who helped connect us in as well, and also, of course, Jamie Strange for being a representative from our area and giving us a voice in Wellington. Again, this council now has an open door and open relationships with ministers of the new government in Wellington. I admire Minister Phil Twyford and other ministers in the Labour government for staying with what had already been set up and what was working, and honouring the agreements and signing them off with our council. This will open Peacock up to 8,000 houses. This is a proper business model. The first 3,700 houses in phase 1, paying DCs of $50,000 per section, hey presto, that happens to be $187 million. The amount of the loan that we have to pay back. Now that's far too simple, and of course any accountant who's hearing this will cringe. But what I'm saying is there is a business loan behind this. So this is the best deal that I understand that's ever been done between government for councils, or for councils, in the history of as far back as I know anyway. The benefits to Hamilton are $70 million in savings and interest alone, plus on top of that $110 million in far rate savings. That's $180 million in savings for our ratepayers. The benefits and freebies from this are astounding. And we couldn't have done this without that support from central government. If things slow down, we need to keep going. We need to go harder than ever. This is a 5 to 10 year plan, and we all know property cycles run for 7 years. So we don't want to stop because things slow down. We just want to keep pouring into this so it's ready to go, and that the sections are there when we come out of another downturn, should there be a downturn. The worst thing we can do is slow down when we're in a downturn, because it takes so long to do a project like this. We're just not ready to go when we come out the other side. I particularly want to thank staff. Blair, you've done a lot of work on this. Chief Executive, Dave McPherson, for doing multiple trips to Wellington with myself and the Chief Executive. Chris Allen, Hamilton's City's Chief Engineer. Your time has come. You're going to be like a pig in poo. Go make it happen, Chris.
Keep the poo in the pipes, mate.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried, 9-4, 4 against.
Okay, we'll now go to item 11, which is on page 635.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you, Mark.
You coming back, Gary?
You're just going to go pick the cash up for the loan, are you, Gary? Going to go survey your riverside property.
Oh, there you go. There's Chris there.
Squeal.
So councillors, look, the previous discussion on that report, I think really clearly recognised the really high importance of project monitoring and reporting for the project, and you're exactly spot on with that discussion. Look, the Chief Executive has anticipated this by a recent announcement that he's setting up a dedicated capital group and nominated me as the chief pig to lead it. So, so look, so this report essentially responds to my new role to take an oversight of our capital project,
but also resolutions that Council made in December 2017, which are in the report in regard to come back to you about processes, delegations and reporting for the efficient delivery of the 10-year plan capital program. So look, we rest assured that we are proposing to significantly lift our game in how we report to you and how we keep a very close eye on all of the moving parts of the whole capital program, not only at a project level but at a financial strategy level. So this will be a joint initiative between myself and the General Manager Corporate to provide really good reporting to Council. So in this report, we've chosen to provide an emerging framework of reporting, which is based on a program approach. We think this will provide a better platform to tell a good project delivery story to not only councillors but to our communities and what's happening in their geographical areas. So for today, we've provided that framework, but we're looking for approval over the next month or so for myself and GM Corporate David Bryant to work with the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee to finalise this and put some meat around the bones of the reporting structure. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll move, seconded by Councillor Robb. Are you happy with that? So we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thanks, Wilbur. Oh, I was going to call you Porky.
Peter Winder.
No, it doesn't apply to me. That's just straight out bullying.
Okay, so there should be a separate report for this. I'm not sure where. I haven't got one, but anyway. Peter, the floor is yours.
This is a bound up one.
So Peter, we'll take the report as read.
I think Blair's going to introduce this to you.
We did hear from Dallas Fisher this morning, who is hugely supportive of your report, and he was reporting on the Waikato Men's business. So yeah, so Blair, I think you've just come into the room. We've just taken the report as read, but handing over to you to comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just give a couple of words and I'll allow Peter to...
Sorry, just for a minute. Sorry, Councillor Paula, you were asking for something? Oh, sorry, yep. Okay.
Thank you, Council. 12 months ago, Council adopted the Waikato Plan and agreed to enter into the next stage of that particular strategy, which was the implementation phase. At the time that Council passed that resolution, it also outlined that it wished to review its participation in the Waikato Plan 12 months down the track, and so that's today. At that time, it identified the three key areas that it wanted to be satisfied around, and those were the outcomes being achieved by the Waikato Plan, funding arrangements for the future, and also other parties' feedback on the Waikato Plan. Since that time, the establishment of the Waikato Plan, moving from plan development through to implementation, has taken longer than anticipated. Mayor Andrew, as Hamilton City Council's representative, has also outlined his concerns with the plan's achievements at the leadership group meeting, and he's done so more than once. And the chief executives of the Waikato Plan have also noted that that the plan has certainly got has some challenges in terms of achieving progress, but at the same time that the relationships of the Waikato Plan are critically important, along the lines that Dallas Fisher outlined this morning. So in response to that context, to Hamilton City Council's resolution, the Mayor's comments, the Chief Executive's feelings, the Chief Executive's engaged Peter Winder to do an independent review of the Waikato Plan and to come back with an independent assessment and recommendation on where to from here. So Peter's report is attached to my report. I'll outline my recommendations, but it's important, I think, Peter just steps you through the review process and what he has observed and his suggested way forward. So I'll hand it to Peter.
Thank you. When I was asked to undertake this review, one of the key things was to put it in the context of the changes to the Local Government Act that are underway to change the purpose of the Act to reinstate the four well-beings. And having had a look at that, the one thing that stands out to me out of that is not that it changes in any way the substance of what councils do, but it changes your licence to advocate on behalf of your community. And I think that goes hand in glove with the vision of the Waikato Plan, of how Waikato speaks to something that's bigger than the individual partners, about how across the region things that are important to multiple partners can be progressed, and can be progressed across the whole range of things that impact on the well-being of the people and the environment and the economy of the region. So I think that's an important starting point and framework for this. In talking to people about the Waikato Plan, I got a whole lot of feedback, and that's summarised in pages 16 and 17 and 18 of the report. And as you work through those bullet points, what you'll see, I think, is that for everyone that had positive things to say, there's someone that said almost exactly the opposite. And that really highlights that across those that are involved in the process, there are some differences of view, of perspective, of motivation and drive. And that has been the case right through the whole of the development of the Waikato Plan. So I think one of the key issues that everyone faces going forward is the extent or the confidence with which those differences can be managed, dealt with and lived with, because they remain. I suppose the other things that I'd highlight out of that is a very strong view from many that there has been considerable value from what has been spent to date, but you have spent a lot of money. Yeah, you've 4 years, a lot of money to get to this point. Along the way, that has spawned a lot of evidence that has been very helpful for other processes. It's been part of the catalyst that ended up with the mandate that Waikato Means Business now has. It's helped inform a raft of other planning decisions. So there is value out of what you've done, and even if the whole thing was to stop now, that value will continue, that work will continue to exist and be available. In terms of my overall conclusions, I suppose the things that I'd like to highlight is, and I said at this point in a report to the Mayoral Forum about collaboration last year, the Waikato region is a rather odd thing. Yeah, it's designed to manage water, not communities of interest. And therefore trying to think about how you manage the whole of the Waikato and doing things to address social issues is an interesting challenge. And therefore it's important that in the way that we think about the Waikato, we are as able to deal with sub-regional issues as big issues that cross boundaries. And my view is the Waikato Plan has the potential to do that, but it does require a degree of sophistication and thinking about the geography as well as the issues in terms of how you approach things. There's been some quite significant leadership discontinuities over the period that have just arisen because of changes in who sits around the table and the amount of time it takes to do that. And one of the reasons that it's taken the length of time that it has to move from plan making to implementation is the introduction of new partners and new people at the leadership group, and they sort of start from square one and have to be brought up to speed and make progress. So there's issues every time the who sits at the table changes. What you're trying to do is hard, and it won't get easier. And if you look at the diagram, figure 3 on page 22 of the report, that talks about risk and complexity and rewards, the key thing here is to get value out of what you're doing, you want to be operating in the top right-hand box where you've got lots of partners. It's difficult to negotiate between the partners to agree what you're going to do. Things are complex to deliver. Everybody has to give up a bit of independence in order to be successful in collaborating in that space, but the benefits are very high. and there's a high risk of failure. So the very nature of the Waikato plan is trying to work in that high risk, high reward space. There is a risk that goes with that. And everyone needs to be well aware that that is the case. And as you move towards implementation, it becomes even harder to work in that space and to keep a very large number of players all on the same page, all agreeing to do the same thing. A couple of other thoughts that I'd really like to highlight. One of the key tensions that I see around the Waikato plan is the sense that the leadership group is seen by some more like the board of a company that's directing resources. And the practical reality is that it can't do that it doesn't have resources, that it can't make decisions for you or any of the other councils. And that therefore it's more appropriate to think of it as a clearinghouse, a facilitator, a broker of relationship between people than as the board of directors that's going to make decisions for you, because it simply can't. The other thing that's really important is the conclusion that I highlighted at the bottom of the page 4 of the executive summary. One voice for the Waikato is unrealistic, but many voices saying the same thing is far more achievable and would be more powerful. And I think along the way, the idea of one voice ended up being sort of morphed into the idea that the leadership group and even the chair of the leadership group would speak on behalf of the Waikato and enter into agreements on behalf of the Waikato. And again, my sense is that's just simply not possible, and it would be wrong. However, if the leadership group is conceived of as the point at which you get everyone on the same page, so that when Hamilton speaks, it is saying the same things as Waipa, as Tainui, as NZTA, then you're in a completely different space. But that requires a rather different view of the leadership group than some people have at the moment. So I suppose in a nutshell, my strong conclusion was this process is at a crossroads where there are sufficient people that have concerns and questions over confidence that you really do need to pause and decide whether or not to proceed. And that if you do that to proceed, you really need confidence that the plan can be translated into implementable projects. And to do that, there's a raft of work that will need to be done around business cases for individual projects where partners will need to agree, yes, they want to do that and they're prepared to fund it. You need to have, I believe, confidence that the leadership group can function as a clearinghouse, facilitator and influencer, not as the board of directors that's attempting to make decisions for you, and that they can function as the facilitator of the message, the point at which the parties all agree that they're going to sing the same song, rather than as the voice that will seek to speak on your behalf without your agreement. So the recommendations in my report are really designed to say, well, if you're confident, or if you can have confidence that you can make that sort of transition around how the Waikato plan is implemented, then these are the sorts of things that you would need to do to make that transition. And it's really about making sure that the terms of reference for the leadership group reflect those key roles of clearinghouse facilitator and influencer, and the facilitator of the many voices saying the same thing, and then that you appropriately resource the step from plan making to plan implementation. And the recommendation that I came to was, well, the Regional Council is probably the most obvious place where that resource could sit, and the region's experience with Waikato Means Business and the role that Harvey Brooks played in particular in project managing that, I think, is a really good example of how this could be taken forward if the Regional Council was prepared to step up and to take that responsibility to work with the parties in the sort of way that Harvey did around Waikato Means Business.
So just finally, Council, and thank you, Peter. So my recommendation to Council, and of course this report that we've received here is not just a report for Hamilton, it's going to all the partners and all the stakeholders in the Waikato plan. So it's all the councils and the other non-council entities. So it's it's a report for all to consider. My recommendation to council here is that we do support the findings of the Winder report, and that we do remain involved in the Waikato plan, subject to those findings being given effect to. And the reason why, the report does respond to the concerns that our council have raised through Mayor Andrew, and that the Chief Executive has identified. By remaining part of the Waikato plan, it preserves Hamilton's ability to influence the future direction of other stakeholders around matters that may be of importance. It also maintains and preserves relationships which are important, and these are relationships more than just with other councils, with the key stakeholders, with the key government agencies, with the other parties that we wish to do business with on a day-to-day basis. Linking back to the long-term plan and the Chief Executive's challenge around finding efficiencies, part of that is also working with other entities and partners to form collaborative arrangements. And in that instance, the Waikato plan may assist our ability to I guess, leverage new and or existing opportunities for partnerships with some of those key players, where we can deliver services in a collaborative environment with other entities other than just ourselves. So my proposed direction would be that if council supports remaining in the Waikato plan under the terms of the Winder review, and just to remind you, that would mean that council would not fund any of the core Waikato plan costs. Those costs would be met by the regional council under this model. So our council would only fund and participate in those particular initiatives that we felt were worthy of being supported, following a detailed business case being prepared and received and considered and approved by the leadership group. And again, that business case process under the Winder recommendations the process of preparing those would be met by the regional council staff, who would be funded by regional council, much as the Waikato Means business model ran with Harvey Brooks, would be brought to the respective stakeholders who may wish to be part of that, and those parties would identify, yes, we're keen and we're prepared to put some funding towards giving effect to those implementation actions. So Hamilton may choose to be involved in none of those actions, and therefore would have to contribute nothing. But those that we felt we would be wanting to be involved with would be met from existing operational budgets. And largely those initiatives would be initiatives that our staff would be considering and working through on a day-to-day basis as part of their normal job. And so it's an opportunity for them to potentially partner with other agencies such as education, DHB, iwi, other councils, etc. So my recommendation is under those terms, delegate to the Chief Executive to go and negotiate with the other council stakeholders and leadership group to give effect to the recommendations in Peter Winder's report, and to agree to a transition plan, and to ensure that transition plan can be given effect to in a timely fashion. If, however, that agreement can't be reached, then our position will be that we withdraw from the Waikato plan. My report also recommends that our nominee, or our representative on the Waikato plan is the Mayor or the Mayor's nominee. Now, of course, whilst we have the right to appoint a person to the leadership group, we don't actually have to exercise that right. So we could choose to have that delegation, but not actually ask that person to attend the meetings, or that person just doesn't attend the meetings. So that's, again, something that's optional for us. It's not required. And as Peter has said, the leadership group role and function would change in terms of the outcomes of the report. And of course, finally, the terms of reference to the leadership group will come back to our council in due course for consideration, the terms of reference. So those are the recommendations that I've made, which, as I say in summary, support the findings of Peter's report. Following today's consideration of this item, it will go to the Mayoral Forum tomorrow, and then for the Mayoral Forum to consider, and then obviously to the Waikato Plan Leadership Group on Monday next week, where they will also consider the report. So our consideration today is the first step in terms of that process, and I guess Hamilton's position will be important to know for those other parties as they go forward and consider the report. So happy to take questions, Your Worship.
Just, Peter, why did you stay with 12 people? I mean, there's no secret I've been pushing to get it down to 7. They promised to get it down to 12 a year ago. It's now, I think, at 19 with another 2 pending, like a runaway train. Their own resolution on the table didn't get followed through, and the date's come and gone now for it. In fact, on the day when the resolution was supposed to come through to decrease to 12, to get it to 12, they appointed 4 more people. why have you recommended 7-12 when a small group like Waikato Men's Business works at 7? We know 7's the optimum number for a group like this when you research it. And we know that 12 got to 19, going to 21, and now it's got to be ramped back to 12 again. I don't know who's going to lose their head, but some people obviously have to. Why didn't we come in hard and get this down to a workable amount of people with one representative from from each group instead of multiple?
The answer to that is that...
I've read your reasons in here, of course. Many voices speaking the same song is better than one voice singing one song. I think that's what it says, but in summary.
So that's one of them, and the other one is the role of facilitating partnership rather than trying to specifically direct resources. So in my mind, a role where it is trying to broker the relationship between partners, you need the partners at the table, and the current leadership reflects broadly the nature of the partners that are involved. I'm not saying that's easy, and there is no, in my view, there is no magic number as to what the right answer is, and it would evolve over time. I think the more important question than the number of people that are there is whether the role and function that I've described will work for Waikato, and whether that gives you confidence to proceed. Because if you don't have confidence to proceed, then it is pointless wasting money having talk fests.
With your visits to the last 2 meetings, would you say it was a talk fest? Or is that's probably not a fair question? We'll move on to...
So if I do respond to that, I mean, my sense is there's an element of... Within the current leadership group, there are what I would describe as people with 2 quite distinctive fundamental drivers. There's a group of very action-orientated people that want to do things and get on and make things happen. And there's a group of people that see value coming from the conversation itself that gives rise to new ideas. And those 2 things sitting side by side is very difficult to accommodate. And that's inherent in the nature of the partnership. And to make progress on a number of the issues that the Waikato Plan seeks to address, you need to have partners that come from those different perspectives at the table and ultimately prepared to commit resources to do things.
If I put up an amendment to your plan to bring the number around the table down to 7, could you see that as workable and a possibility as being a step in the right direction?
I think that an effort to reduce the numbers at this point would be very difficult for a large number of the partners.
But isn't there no better time to do it now that we're making a radical change to the policy? We're making radical change here anyway. There's a lot more people appointed now than 12. Why not clean it up in one go? Because this is exactly the conversation we had a year ago. They would get it there, but it just never happened. It just kept growing. And here we are back at 12, growing, with the possibility of it growing again. So the model of 7, 1 from each of the industries that's involved, 1 from social, 1 from government, 1 from local government, 1...
One of the key issues I think that you have in that, or that the region has in that regard, is the discussion around how iwi is represented at the table is one of the reasons that you've ended up with more than you intended in the first place, and I can't see how you would end up with an agreement that the iwi groups will be represented by 1. So I think that there's a significant challenge in that regard as to how that is done and how that reflects the relationship that all of the parties have with all of the iwi across the region.
Isn't that the same challenge that local government's got of how many territorial authorities are there in the Waikato?
Yes.
How many have we got?
It's a very similar challenge.
But how many have we got?
11.
11, and what I'm suggesting is we have one appointee that comes back to the mayoral forum to report. And surely it's the same in business. We've got multiple business groups, but you have one person at the table who then reports out to all the business groups. I mean, you can't have 4 iwi, surely, out of 12 people.
I would agree that that's very challenging.
But that's the proposal.
And yet at the moment we've gone through the whole process to get that group of iwi representatives at the table.
I think it's worth just sort of taking Mayor Andrews' questions in the context of the role of the leadership group and how the Waikato plan would operate, which is quite different to how it is currently structured. So this model here, currently the Waikato plan essentially, is funded by all the councils. No one else funds the Waikato plan but the councils. The Waikato plan engages some external resource along with some project resource to identify a range of initiatives that will then be pursued. The proposed model is quite different in that the core costs of the Waikato plan will be met by the regional council to fund the appropriate sort of project business analyst type resources to work with the relevant stakeholders to identify opportunities guided by the leadership group with robust business cases built around those with the relevant parties who show some interest, funding to be identified in those business cases relevant to those parties who are interested, and then back to the leadership group for support. The leadership group can't allocate money, can't spend the money of the relevant parties. It's a very different model to where it currently operates. And so the role of the leadership group, as Peter has said, a supportive voice, one of many voices supportive of various initiatives, a voice looking at the 4 wellbeings areas, as opposed to a decision-making body, board of governors who are spending money largely put in by councils on initiatives that group determines. So it's a very different focus.
Yep. I can't help feeling from the speeches that Blair's just given. I'd like you to comment on this, Blair, which is my first question. I don't see what the hell they're going to do. Yes, the 4 well-beings, we've all been given a bit of more freedom to work in that area. What's be tangible, be practical? What are the sorts of things we're going to do other than talk to the same people we could talk at perhaps a combination of the future-proof, the Waikato River Group, the Mayoral Forum, LAS, LG&Z Zone 2, Waikato Means Business, you know, what's the special nature of this outfit that is more than just a coffee table book?
So the clear intention of the plan in the first place was to provide alignment and a vehicle by which you could leverage partnerships. There are a number of other ways that you can leverage partnership, and the debate that you've just had about the Housing Infrastructure Fund, the work that you have underway on the Auckland-Hamilton Growth Corridor are really good examples of the sorts of partnership arrangements that all of the parties have. There are some issues which I think are so Waikato-wide that a broader approach to partnership will be far more appropriate. And the one that I highlight in part of the report is the response to water management, climate change and the economy, where that is going to be way beyond the capability and capacity of the regional council to address by itself. It will have a profound effect on the economy and the expenditure required of every territorial authority. It's going to be very big in terms of land use. How the Waikato as a region deals with that is going to necessitate a far broader range of partnership approaches than
Can't we get together with so those groups get together on that project to devise a regional strategy for that issue?
yes, you could do it issue by issue. The vision for the Waikato plan was to try to focus the efforts of the Waikato on the things that were agreed to be the highest priority by the key players. The conclusion that I came to that says this is a crossroads goes to exactly the point that you've raised as to whether or not to continue with an attempt to have a region-wide ongoing partnership between the players in a place where they come together, or other approaches which could be, sub-regional, issue-specific, play as you go. That's the nature of the choice that you need to make. In making that choice, I think you need to be cognizant of the investment that's been made, both in terms of the financial outlay and relationships, and the nature of the partnerships and expectations of the others that are currently at the table.
You're talking about the partnerships there, and sitting as a councillor around this table, I find it really hard to see. I'm asking you about any partnership that I'm involved in, or any of the other councillors much here. Where does it impinge on me as a councillor when I'm discussing the Housing Infrastructure Fund or the train to Auckland or other sort of big things that we're involved in at the moment with other organisations? Yeah, how does the Waikato plan grouping help me with that as an individual councillor here?
I think, Councillor Dave, in a Hamilton context, it's probably limited. The benefit is significantly higher for the other entities and stakeholders and the other councils in the Waikato than Hamilton. And I think that's one of the challenges that I've recognised in asking Peter to assist us in terms of where to from here, because it seems inherently challenging when we're putting in money to the Waikato plan, and it's hard to describe the benefit for Hamilton, which is what you're asking. Certainly, the smaller councils, the councils around us, the other stakeholders, more benefit because they probably don't have the same scale or our ability to engage with other stakeholders entities. So I totally agree with what you're asking, because it's very hard for me to articulate the specific benefit, which is why Peter's recommendation, I guess, addresses those issues for us, and that we're not putting any of our money on the table unless we choose to. Anything that's worked up is worked up on the basis of a robust business case, which actually draws in those other players who would otherwise potentially freeload off our investment to stump up. So if you believe in this, put your money on the table and be part of a true partnership. And I'm talking beyond councils here, I'm talking non-councils, government agencies, etc. And so we may find that we don't participate in any initiative for some time. And we might just stand back and say, we're part of the Waikato plan, but we'll just observe and let others see the benefit. And that's fine. But there might be the odd thing that we choose to participate in, and therefore we have the ability to do so. We are very lucky. Most of the things that we talk about in our agenda and we deal with, because we've got the scale, we have the connection with Wellington, we can just get on and do with it. And I think that's the key here. And as Peter said, we're trying to find a way forward that Hamilton can still be part of the relationship process, but our skin in the game is very small, so to speak.
Okay, so thanks for that part. One other line of questioning is, how can I get confidence that the regional council, which is a bunch of mainly farmers, without much knowledge, as I've seen through the transport strategy discussions of what happens in cities and needs of cities, how can I have confidence that they're the right place to house this, and that they wouldn't follow what I see as a bit of a predetermined, not deliberate, just sort of by their nature as being a regional organisation, to take over housed in their organisation that they had funded?
In my mind, I have some of the same reservations. However, I think the experience with Waikato Men's Business and the way that the regional council has approached that, it demonstrates a clear capacity for them to do things that are, quite a long way away from their roots in terms of water management and environmental protection. So, and hand in glove with that goes, pressure that the other partners place on them to do the right job.
We've had two examples just earlier this week where regional organisations, one of them being that we're involved with or associated with, one being the Regional Council, the other being Future Proof, it put in oppositions that clearly were not supported by the overwhelming majority of council to do with growth, special housing area in particular, sort of submitted against things that Hamilton clearly wanted to do. You know, I'm talking to or asking about, you know, these organisations get a mind of their own and insert themselves into activities that are the bailiwick of a particular organisation, in this case Hamilton City. How do you stop that happening? You might well-meaning researchers start commenting in public on something that's not their business but your business.
Look, I think, Dave, fair question, fair risk. The role of the Regional Council, as envisaged by Peter's report, is really to fund a core team who does the legwork on behalf of the stakeholders to I guess, prepare business cases, to administer the engine of the plan. I don't see the role of that group to being the advocacy group or to be out there doing the things that you sort of described as a risk. It's really, they have the ability to rate and to fund a central pool, probably a couple of people who will go away, work with the stakeholders to work up, take ideas that link to the strategy of the Waikato plan under those 4 wellbeings, put some robust structure around those, a robust business case, and bring them back to the respective stakeholders. That's the role I see, not probably the area that you potentially see as risk. And I think if that happened, the partners would all hold the Regional Council accountable for that very quickly and very publicly, I suggest.
Does the terms of reference sort of inhibit that? I know you can never stop it, do you think?
Yes, it should. And the points that you're making go quite directly to the 2 things I've stressed about the role of the leadership group. You know, it should not be there seeking to do your business and spend your resources for you. Neither should it be seeking to speak for you, because only you can speak for you. So it's very important to see that distinction between where they have been in the vision for one voice for the Waikato and the idea that this is the place where people agree how they will do things jointly and what they will say jointly.
Sure. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
I just move this time extension, seconded by Councillor Paula. Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Look, I'm just going to try and remain well-humoured about this because, you know, I have a long experience in the Waikato plan. And as one of the 5 non-farmers of the Waikato Regional Council for many years, I think I've got room to talk here. Look, can I ask them some questions? I know I will have some comments and debate. Can I ask a couple of questions? It's fair to say, isn't it, Blair, that central government has made it quite clear that it wants regions to work collaboratively and that they do put a lot of emphasis on regional planning and collaboration?
Yes, they do, and I guess they do that through a variety of forums and arrangements, but certainly they encourage it, and they've been supportive of the Waikato plan.
Yeah, and I know, for example, it's true that organisations such as New Zealand Sport will fund at a regional level, not at a local level at this point in time. Yes, Peter's nodding too. And thank you, Peter, for your words. I might ask you, if I was going to be grumpy, why you think that regional council is all about just about water, and you know I will disagree with you on that. They are well, you did say that. The regional policy statement is about many broader well-beings than the waters, as is the Resource Management Act, of course.
My comment was going more to the origins of regional councils and the way their boundaries were established, which was fundamentally about catchments.
That didn't come across in the way you said it. So thank you for that clarification.
That's what I meant. I mean, clearly, once the 4 well-beings are inserted back into the Local Government Act, regional councils will have the same as territorial local authorities with respect to all 4 of the wellbeings.
And at the beginning of this process, it's fair to say that those 4 wellbeings were in place until the amendment, and now we're going back to them, yeah? So we've been a bit around the traps in that. It's fair to say, isn't it, that Waikato means business was in one of the positive benefits from the big mess that the Waikato plan was in the beginning, because I think we all agree it was a bit unwieldy and people were coming together, but the Waikato means business. Isn't it fair enough to say that Waikato Regional Council showed leadership in putting Harvey Brooks across Waikato means business and cracking on with that?
Look, I think that model is a good example of where centrally funded with the appropriate resource, you can take a good idea and actually make it happen. And I think that's what Peter is really saying here.
But what I'm saying is partly in response to a couple of
the current structure needs that type of a structure to make it work.
Well, I agree, but my question is in relation to Waikato Regional being able to have the well-being of other parts of the region at heart. It did, in fact, set that up. Waikato means business.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So just let's remember that good things came from that. And I know, Councillor Gallagher, you were one of the representatives on the Waikato plan in the early days. Yes, you attended a number of meetings.
Is it his fault?
Point of clarification. Julie Hardacre was representative.
And when she
I
couldn't
was
make
always the understudy.
Yeah.
And I sat in the public gallery at all those meetings. That's why I had to get hearing aids to hear what was going on.
Oh, I know. I did sit next to you a couple of times in those meetings. But anyway, I guess I was just going to say that at the beginning, isn't it fair to say that what we had before the Waikato plan, imperfect as it is, was 11 territorial authorities and a regional council all talking past each other. In fact, just working within their own boundaries without any regard to cross-boundary benefits or opportunities.
Yes, I mean the Waikato plan was responding to that context.
Yeah, so it was
an opportunity.
Things aren't necessarily perfect today, but they weren't better before this started off either.
That's. I mean, I think that's the opportunity the Waikato plan is looking to respond to, Councillor Paula.
Okay, I think I've just got one more question. So we'd all agree that this was created to create some regional conversation and some broad-scale buy-in at that time. Okay. So iwi representation, because I was there when it was on, when it was put together in the first place, very fraught. I agree, very difficult and complex. Originally, there was one.
Excuse me, Paula. Is this?
It's a question. You allowed Councillor McPherson's questions were somewhat leading. I've just got two more questions.
Yeah,
honestly,
just hold back a little bit. Are you talking about iwi representation on
the Waikato plan group? Yeah. Because in the beginning there was one iwi representative that it fell down when he was unable to do the role on his own and actually had no mandate at the various other hapu, yeah? So, and I'm not, but I just want the factual, I wanted this council to understand that we started off with one. It was problematic. We were looking for something, it was looking for something better. This may not be the solution, but that was why it was done, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think it's taken, as I said, some time to get the iwi representation on the Waikato plan to the level where iwi are happy. And certainly the early representative was there to provide context, but didn't have the mandate through the appropriate process.
Yeah. And I think the Waikato plan was designed to be an iterative process. That was a starting point. It was broad. And given what you said, Peter, that now we need to focus, you're saying, yep, that's broad. And now we need to hone down, just like Dallas said this morning, we need to hone on the work streams more closely and get more focused on what we do now. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the Waikato plan is a very big, broad brush strategy with a number of high-level actions underneath it.
Yeah.
The next step is to implement those actions. Each one of them needs a business case and partners need to decide whether or not they wish to proceed and how.
Yeah, absolutely. So that broad basis was at least a good sort of base to have those more targeted discussions from. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So the terms of reference, Peter, on page 50, are they the new terms of reference?
No, they're the current terms
of
reference.
So where are yours?
I haven't prepared an amendment to give effect to the recommendation.
Okay. So the in the staff recommendation on page 3, where it says support the recommendations of the report to amend the leadership group terms of reference. That's
So, Angela, what I'm identifying in my recommendations is that noting that terms of reference, amended terms of reference, will need to come back to us in due course. Peter's brief wasn't to write the new terms of reference, but that would be one of the key issues that the Chief Executive would be talking to the other parties about, and then, of course, making sure that we get those resolved quickly as part of the transition process.
So if the staff recommendation with possible change from Mayor Andrew goes ahead, is that enough information? Is that really clear? Because to seek the fundamental changes that I think, certainly that I am looking for, is that enough direction?
I'm very clear that if you pass these resolutions, that you're tasking the Chief Executive to go and seek the outcomes that Peter Winder's report has identified are essential, which is though in the way forward section, that we seek all of those to be achieved to give effect to this.
Yeah.
Failure to do so, Hamilton then is out.
Okay, and that's good. And then, and Peter, you will speak to your report with the other councils over the next so many days?
So the current plan is to speak to the Mayoral Forum, tomorrow morning, and then the Waikato Plan Leadership Group on Monday.
Okay, and is that where, Blair, is that where a final decision will be made based on the feedback from the Mayoral Forum and councils?
That will be where the leadership group will take a view, but ultimately the decisions will be made by each respective council through their chief executives and the councils. But you can be assured that we will, myself and Richard will go from here with clarity of direction, and we will work very closely with those other stakeholders if council follows the recommendations. And so there'll be no misunderstanding of the councils and stakeholders as to our position and what we would be seeking.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got one question, and that's around the staff recommendation 4E, which says that approves Hamilton City Council's withdrawal should the other partner councils, stakeholders and Waikato Plan Leadership Group not agree with the substantive recommendations. How will you measure that? You know, is there a vote by majority, or is it if one of that group don't? It just seems a little bit the fact that you're asking us to approve withdrawal without perhaps a mandate as to how you're going to measure that just concerns me a little bit.
It's fair to say when I wrote the report and recommendations, it wasn't the easiest report to write.
No, I can understand. I don't mean it to be a criticism of your recommendation at all.
Rob, if I answer it this way, Peter's report on sort of, I don't know what pages in your report, but Roman numerals 5 and 6 in terms of his pages outline a way forward and outlines I guess key criteria that need to be given effect to.
Yep.
What I'm referring to there is if those aren't given effect to largely as described there, then we don't meet our criteria for remaining in the plan.
Yeah. So are we giving you approval now to withdraw if you go round the room and get a feeling that they're not supportive of Peter's report?
Yes, I mean
if you got one or two pushing back, is that enough for us for you to make, or someone to make the decision that we're withdrawing?
If one or two push back, I'm not concerned. But if the changes to the Waikato plan by majority are not accepted in accordance with this, then
so it'll be a bit of a straw poll around the room to say.
I'll let Peter describe how he would.
Okay.
Well, there is one other thing. The Waikato Plan Leadership Group is a joint committee. The terms of reference of a joint committee will require resolutions by each council that is part of the joint committee. So it will automatically come back to you as part of that process.
Okay. So it could potentially mean a majority of those on the Waikato plan are resolving not to accept your recommendations.
So, in terms of changing the terms of reference, my recollection of the Local Government Act process for a joint committee is each council that is part of the joint committee has to pass the resolution to approve the terms of reference for the committee. So the committee itself can't change their terms of reference unilaterally. So there would need to be a process by which the committee might recommend to each of the councils a change to the terms of reference. If you can't get that agreement from the leadership group, then your conditions would not be met. And equally, if all of the councils that are part of the joint committee fail to pass the requisite resolutions, then your requirements would not be met.
So it's pretty unwieldy, isn't it?
Well, joint committees are. They're not easy things to run.
Okay. But there is a process. You're confident that there is a process that if the Mayor or Blair came back and said, look, there's not majority support for my report, for your report, then that gives us the trigger point to say whether we stay in or move.
Yes, and
whether we stay in or go.
I think, Council, we need a very clear mandate as to what our position is in terms of going forward from here. But what I would say is that this report hasn't landed on our table cold and no one else has seen it. So, Peter, over the last week and a half, the draft of this report has been made available to all the other council chief executives. It's been made available to the leadership group members. They've had a chance to provide feedback. We've had a conference discussion prior to today, and the feedback, well, Peter can talk about the feedback, but my understanding is that there's been limited changes to the draft. The feedback has been largely supportive in terms of the direction and findings. I think it's very clear that everyone recognises that change needs to be made, and everyone is seeking a way forward that preserves the work that's been done, but actually recognises the issues, the very issues that we're grappling with here, and seeks to find a way forward. So we have tried to develop engineer a process that's sensitive to all the decision points, but recognise that we have to go first. And I've driven that pretty hard to achieve a discussion for us today, but also provides us with a way to go forward with clarity. So when we can have those discussions with the councils and CEOs and stakeholders, our position is very, very clear.
So, Peter, do you think it's a good move for us to be the first one off the block, given that I suspect that a lot of the criticism comes from some other members of the project team who probably resent Hamilton's size, or however you... Or is that too hard a question?
Well, if I answer a slightly different question, I mean, whether it's a good idea or not, you are the first ones to consider this, and that's just the sequence of events. Hamilton is by no means the only partner expressing concerns, and the feedback that's in my report, you know, as I said, has, for everyone that thinks is optimistic, there's someone that's pessimistic. For everyone that likes talking, there's another group that just want to go and do some stuff. So for me, the most important thing is that there is a mature discussion about how to proceed, and that the indications from the Regional Council Chief Executive are that he thinks his council is up for the role that we've pitched in the report. Now, clearly, if the Regional Council wasn't prepared to resource that, then the conditions that you would set in the recommendations in Blair's report would not be met, and would be it. So, yeah, there's a range. What I've tried to set out is a way that brings it to a head, recognises that you've got a crossroad, you're at a crossroads, and provides a way forward or not.
So just a question, sorry to keep going because I said I only had one question, but just a question around the timing. I thought when this was discussed this morning in terms of this remaining on the agenda, we were considering this because everyone was meeting tomorrow and Monday. Yes, if we're the first ones off the block to do this, what sort of feedback are you expecting to get tomorrow and Monday if the others haven't really considered it to the extent that we have, that we are considering it now. Is it going to be fruitful tomorrow for you to go, the next question from that, is it going to be fruitful for you to go tomorrow and say, well, this is what our council decided?
Absolutely.
But hang on, what about the feedback from the other participants in terms of?
Well, I think it's clear that of the other councils, we are the only ones who are raising the major issues in terms of the councils. I mean, there may be some concerns, but none of the other councils are saying, as Hamilton has said, quote, so clearly, one, we have a resolution responded to by the end of this week. We're the only council in that situation. Secondly, we are the only council via Mayor Andrew who is voicing concerns at the leadership group to the extent that we are. And so they are looking for clarity from Hamilton because it's very influential to their position in terms of the project going forward. The major item on the agenda for the leadership group on Monday is the considerations report and where to from here. So Hamilton's decision today is absolutely fundamental to the mayoral forum's discussion tomorrow, and the leadership group's discussion on Monday. So it was really, really important that today we did have that. Now, as Peter has said, each of the councils will then need to consider the revised terms of reference, but as a starting point, they are all in the plan and have indicated as recently as our telephone call this week that they remain in the plan. So we are different in that we have a solution, we have our concerns which are demonstrably different to their position.
To be fair, Blair, there is a lot of concern in the room. That's you're brushing it up that there's something pretty down there and it's not.
So to clarify, Andrew,
I mean, no, Blair has just made it clear to the group here that it's a happy group down there and everyone's in, but Hamilton, well, there's discontent amongst the group, Blair.
If I clarify, I'm not suggesting that the other councils aren't happy on everything. Quite supportive of your comment, Mayor Andrew. I'm not saying we are going to withdraw. They don't have a resolution that time limits their involvement to the 30th of June. So in that respect, we are different. Certainly don't wish to speak on their behalf in terms of the elements of concern. I think Peter's report has absolutely captured other councils' feedback, which does have areas where they are unsatisfied. And so I do support that, Andrew.
But if I read this recommendation, we're really going. I'm not saying this is an ultimatum here, but there are some comments in here that are suggesting, as I read them, that we are going to this meeting tomorrow and Monday and saying, well, we've read Peter's report, we've considered it. This is what will keep us in the tent, and this is what will move us out of the tent. So are we going in with a big stick to those who might be sitting there saying, well, if that's the way that Hamilton wants to run this organisation, we're either here or we're not?
Simply, the answer is yes. And I think the reason why is because I'm responding to the concerns 12 months ago, I'm responding to the resolution, I'm responding to the feedback, and I believe that to satisfy the concerns that I've heard around this table, the concerns I've heard from Mayor Andrew as our representative, we do need to be really, really clear and have a very, very clear position. And as Peter has said, the Waikato plan may well continue with or without Hamilton. Yeah. But I need to be very, very clear as to what our non-negotiables are. And so that's what I've put in my report now. Happy for those to be tested or changed through amendments, but I'm trying to give you a very clear position that I believe we need when we go forward here.
But the potential risk then, though, is that, from following on from Dallas's good comments this morning, is that wielding a stick will scare them all away, or result in us leaving simply because we've set some rules, and that may be to our detriment as well as potentially to theirs. And I think that's a risk.
Well, the recommendations actually provide a way for the Waikato plan to continue with or without Hamilton. And given that, as Blair said earlier, a number of the smaller councils see significantly greater value in the process for them than you have in terms of your ability to leverage relationships and to do things in partnership with others. So shifting the coordination and resourcing to the regional council provides a way for them to continue to do that, which means that your decision doesn't need to negatively impact on them if you decide to withdraw. And therefore there's a way that lots of people could be happy with more than one outcome.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mayor Andrew, is there a motion on the books? If not, I wanted to move in.
Point of order, I had indicated to Mayor I was a motion, but I'm happy to.
Well, I don't mind. There's no point of order in that. That's silly. I'm trying to find out if there is a motion on the table.
So
I've moved and Mark seconded.
So there is.
Okay, thank you. Then I have an amendment.
Okay. So, Paula, can you get your motion on the board?
Can I actually ask you, I gave you a clear notice that I had a motion to put, but I'll yield to Councillor Southgate if she came first.
I don't care who's first. I just want to
Okay,
know
all
if
right.
there is one.
Apologies, Deputy
That's
Mayor.
what I was talking about, if there was one.
Has chosen Councillor Southgate, I yield.
Going out, Mayor Andrew.
Okay.
Councillors, just to explain, the only addition is as the discussion has been around E and our ability to withdraw, that prior to any withdrawal, so we agree with the staff recommendation, we go to the meeting tomorrow in good faith. Prior to any withdrawal, it comes back to council for our clear understanding about the whys and wherefores. That's it. Quite simple.
If I'm allowed to, I'd be happy to second that. I attempted to move it. The Mayor would let me, I'll second it.
I'd be glad for you to second it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that the... Mr Chair, now that the councillors Gallagher and Southgate have worked out who's the preeminent person in this two-person team, I would like to move an amendment, and that, and I'll explain it. It would, in A, it would, after the word supports, it would say supports in principle, just inserting the words in principle, that's all, and then add a new H. And the H is relatively simple. It says, report, the Chief Executive report back on the outcome of the work in A to G to the August Council meeting. Sorry? I can't read it. See the other one, sorry. I apologise if it is similar.
Yeah, because Councillor Southgate is asking to come to report back, and so are you. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry. Okay, if that's the case, then I'd just be asking the words in principle to be inserted.
I'm not opposed to the words in principle.
Right.
I would have just said to you, Dave, if you wanted a date, that September would be more reasonable than August.
Yeah,
but it's coming
already,
back for approval, so...
Already agreed. Already agreed.
All right, perfect.
Couldn't read it. Can we, and you're in principle?
Yeah, I'm happy with the words in principle that you are, Martin.
I'm happy with everything.
All right, good.
I'm happy with the Mayor, I'm happy with you.
I'm happy with all of you then.
Okie doke. Let's make it at least September. Is that reasonable? Oh, yeah, okay.
We want to hear back from the other council.
Yeah. But I think August is too fresh after all.
No, put the year in the...
I'd like a holiday in July.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Question of the... So this is in terms of numbers of a board, our recommendation is to stick with 12, or is it more than that that's in the report?
Councillor Andrew, I'm just putting up an amendment to that effect.
Okay, cool.
take a 5-minute break, guys.
5-minute break. Jeff, enough time for a beer, mate.
Okay, Paula, we're in debate. Your motion, so it's your motion, so we're in debate.
Okay. Oh gosh, just sorry. Okay, thank you. Look, I'm happy that we've reached an agreement. I was a bit alarmed, I will say, when first I heard that we wanted to pull out. And I'm relieved to see, at least in part, a change of heart and more of a focus on leadership to bring this ship around, which I think we need to do. Since I've been on the City Council, it has concerned me of the lack of understanding around the history of the plan and the functions of the parties within it. But I don't want to look backwards, I want to look forward. I think we've got to remember that as a council, as a city council, as a big metropolis, we're not an island that operates independently of the rest of the world. We are interconnected with the wider regional wellbeing, and vice versa. We have a role to play as leaders in that space. So I'm pleased that we're going into some negotiations to see how the future of this plan looks, to create a better governance structure, and for Mayor Andrew to lead that. I've already taken a pot shot at Peter for his comments about regional government, and so that's already been said. But I will say that this started in an era where communication and cooperation between parts of the region was at quite a low standard, and there wasn't a lot of buy-in to what the regional situation was, what all the opportunities. So Waikato means business arose out of an identified opportunity, and I have to say I'm really pleased, and I hope you guys are too, with the progress of Waikato means business. And Dallas was with us this morning talking about the next steps. What's that?
Yep, 2 minutes.
Oh, I thought we were going a bit longer than 2 minutes. All right, let me just finish one more with your leave, just an extension. I think this has the potential to be resolved. I think it's really important for us to take a wider lens and to show leadership in this. And just to remember, my final point is that I am not making light of the fact that government and many other parties at a national level require regional collaboration and cooperation to bring their funding to the table. So we must hold hands with our regional neighbours and we must try and make this work so we can attract as much investment and collaboration into the Waikato and hence into Hamilton as possible. Thank you.
Okay, just before we go to Councillor Angela, I'm just going to go to the Deputy Mayor who needs to correct a statement that he's made.
Councillor Southgate correctly said I was on the previous Waikato Plan Group because I was the deputy, and there was at least one occasion where I did represent the city in Tiamutu, and I was deputy to Paula Southgate. Gee, this is a long day. Julie, very different person. Julie Hardacre, a very different person, but I was Julie Hardacre's deputy, and I did have one occasion where I have represented. So you were totally correct, Councillor Southgate.
Councillor Angela.
Look, someone has to take some leadership here. It's not working. I think the review clearly said I was aghast by the number of bullet points and recommendations from the review. So someone has to take some leadership because something has to change. I was disappointed and certainly a backseat to this journey. I haven't been in the front seat at all. The Waikato plan calls, certainly the summary document, calls Hamilton the hub. We're the metro city with 166,000 people. We're a little bit more than a hub. And I think that has been very challenging for elected members on this, well, I won't talk for this council, but certainly the previous council when this all started, to just be called a hub. It is like we're a little bit of a second thought here. The goals that they should have achieved already were around developing a regional strategy to identify priorities for service and technology, better government services, advocate for regional transport, encourage significant and national cycling and walking strategies, and I've seen none of that. There's been none of that. We heard from Dallas today, the Economic Development Agency, an exemplary model, and I wish them all the future success that I think they have. And seriously, 19 people around a group is incredibly hard to manage, so I'm very supportive of the motion, and I do worry we're going to be the big bad wolf here because we're the first cab off the rank, but we are the major city and someone has to take a bit of leadership here. It is important to have partnerships with the region, but they have to be partnerships that everyone gets value out of and that actually deliver some tangible results.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, I'll be brief. I'm a bit torn here. I listened to Dallas this morning saying that we need this. I don't have any desire to damage relationships with our neighbours, and I support regional conversations. But then again, I think we're having a lot of regional conversations. I think there's a lot of groups doing good work here. And I find myself confused, unimpressed and unenthused. I feel a bit sorry for Peter and Blair. I feel like they've just performed 10 hours of open heart surgery, but on this patient. But I'm not convinced the patient's going to make it. I'm sorry. I just think it's achieved bugger all. Its purpose is, to me, ill-defined. If something is not working to this extent, if it's as broken as it feels, there's usually a reason for it, and it's possibly because his role is ill-defined, or it's maybe just not necessary in the first place. I'm sorry, I don't like sounding negative about attempts at regional cooperation, but I'm just not sure there's a place for this one because we've got a lot of other stuff going on. So that's me. Thank you.
Can I just ask the Chief Executive what happens if the motion gets voted down?
What's the previous resolution on file? If this is voted down, is status quo prevails, or was there a recommendation that we're...
So the previous resolution was that the council reviews its ongoing participation in the Waikato plan by 30th of June 2018.
Yeah, so if this is voted down, it's status quo,
yep.
Our position, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're still in it under the old regime? Yeah, sure. Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes. frankly, local government, the structure of local government in New Zealand now is something of a dog. In the Waikato region, in my view, we have far too many councils. People don't differentiate between having a good combined council and good community boards. I think the recent example of our attempts at water, where I think a particular council feared it was a sort of thin end to the wedge to amalgamation, was a good example. A lot of good public money and ratepayer money wasted in the end on that particular exercise. So this is not a perfect model by any stretch of the imagination. And I certainly know that the previous Mayor, Julie Hardacre, was just as frustrated as all of you around this process, although I think she tried to do some laudable things to really get this Waikato plan into ship shape. But I think we've got to not underestimate the interconnected relationships we have with our regional TAs and our region. We are effectively the capital of the Waikato, and I don't say that without, I say that without apology. We are significant the hub. We should adopt posture, and without being arrogant, we should actually be there for the major leadership role. This structure is by no means the last word at all. And I accept that, frankly, the governance body seems a bit unwieldy, but I don't think that is the critical thing. The critical thing is what it does, what it achieves, and I think we've got to be very, very careful if we withdraw from this particular exercise. The confusing and mixed signals we will send to central government as a Waikato region. Just as we have done some incredible things, a la the development, our rail service to Auckland, by the excellent relationship we have as the City of Hamilton with Wellington. We have also, in my view, have to work very closely in all the relevant regional forums to actually have that regional relationship. This is a joint committee, so this committee essentially does nothing unless you tick it off and are part of it, and at the moment you don't get to pay until you approve of a specific project. Do not underestimate the leadership role of the Mayor's Forum, because basically that's the significant, if you like, port of call. This is one group, but I think Dallas Fisher has given you advice today that it is far, far better to be in the tent. It is not a perfect model. I don't want to sort of talk about an international or raise this to being in the EU or out of the EU. But if you want to look at an example of the hapless Prime Minister of the UK going outside the tent and the leaders of France and Germany getting on with it inside the tent, as imperfect as it is, I just urge you at this point, go in hard for your negotiations, absolutely look at reduction in numbers, but at this point, stay in the tent.
Good on you, mate. You're running without the clock there. You could have gone all day. Councillor Dave.
Thanks.
You've got 2 minutes, Dave.
Yep, I'm all for regional cooperation and participation and partnership. But I did notice that the Deputy Mayor described local government in the Waikato as a dog, and I absolutely agree with him. And I think what we've got here is a dog's breakfast. I'm not going to oppose this, I'm going to support this because we've got 2 or 3 months to make the breakfast edible, barely edible perhaps. You know, I'm not confident that it's going to actually do anything, like many other speakers, despite you can be as impassioned as you like, Mr Deputy Mayor, but it doesn't make the breakfast edible. By the way, sorry, Councillor O'Leary, we've got 169,000 population as of tomorrow, the 30th, according to projections. Look, I'm suspicious also, and I did say this more or less in my questions about the influence of the regional council, not through any intent, by the fact that they're the only region-wide organisation, and they assume the position quite often of being in charge or telling other TLAs and other organisations what they can and can't do in matters of policy. I'm not talking about things like resource consents where they have an absolute right to take up environmental issues. I'm talking about in some of the other 3 well-beings, and I think that needs to be watched closely by our negotiators. I think that by saying we support in principle signals we support regional cooperation and partnership. It doesn't say we support all the details of this organisation that we have at the moment. I think it's up for our negotiators to come back with a much better package than we've had so far that can prove that it will activate the base rather than just talk about it.
A amendment to put up. That I need a seconder for. You've spoken, sorry.
If you can understand Morse code, you can probably work it out. Tap, 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 tap.
So I need a seconder who hasn't spoken.
You get to second that, I get to speak again.
Break to collaborate with you and to be reasonable to come up with an amendment, and I did that. If I had thought that I was going to make the changes that you requested and then you were going to come up with a completely other amendment at last moment, I probably would have just stuck with what I had. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Thank you. I've heard what you're saying. The debate.
I don't think it's appropriate, Mr. Mayor, with respect to have this sort of discussion while we're in the middle of debate. You can put up an amendment, but you have to follow the strict rules, not to negotiate over amendments, no matter how many extra ones you might want to put up.
So is there a seconder who hasn't spoken who would second my motion? This is the appropriate time. Okay. Ryan? Have you spoken?
He hasn't spoken.
Okay.
I'm keeping lists.
Always. It's a safe bet, but, you know, not this time. Yeah.
No. Okay. No. Point of order. What's the point of order?
Point of order is, do members then get to speak again on the amendment?
I'll have to...
So a point of process, Deputy Mayor, rather than a point of order, point of process is that the mover of the original motion gets to speak again.
Not the seconder, thank goodness.
That's Councillor Southgate.
So do I speak now?
No.
But I still get my right to reply regardless, and I get to speak again.
Okay. Look, I've heard the debates around the table. I'm debating now. I've heard the debate around the table, and the debate around the table has caused me to put this amendment up. Look, I've said on this panel, there's a motion was put by this group a year ago to bring the numbers down to 12. The numbers have meanwhile gone up over the last 12 months to 21. It's out of control. The membership group that are running this, there's 3 paying members around the everybody else is there spending money that's not theirs, wanting a whole lot with our money. Us in Regional Council have been paying 70 to 80% of all the costs, with 2 voices between us out of don't know how many. It's been a total shambles. It's been run in a way that they don't even take notice of their own resolutions. On top of that, in the meantime, if you want collaboration, you've got the waters issue, where the 3 of us were supposed to come together. One of them get there for whatever reasons in one direction, the other in the other direction. Blair's shaking his head and telling me not to say what I'm about to say. Has a common chair between Auckland Waters, where they've gone, and running the Waikato plan. I mean, it's a schmozzle. And we're sitting there trying to resuscitate this thing and save it again. Just cremate it and get it over and done with. Put yourselves out of your pain. I have to sit there and listen. Look, we've got the Mayoral Forum. The Mayoral Forum's great. We all get together, we all pay our way, and we all talk and we listen to each other, and we all come back to our councils and try and sell back to our councils where we want to go, but each member around the table is paying. What's this about? It hasn't, from what I can see, it hasn't achieved anything. If you want to talk fest, it's great, but it doesn't achieve anything. That's why I put my amendment up. Because I just can't stand going through this again in another few months' time.
Schmozzle with 2Z to 1. Ryan?
Approval. Big chair. Mine? Awesome. Whilst I can't speak to the pain of the Mayor, I do understand his frustration, but I do believe that this report does go somewhere to address those, and if the wider group fails to address them, then we have that right to pull out and address it as per Paula's motion. I would just question Paula and your seconder with regard to reduce the membership significantly. I struggle with the vagueness of that and appreciate the Mayor's points. 21 members now and the recommendation is 12. I'd rather that see something like as per the recommendation or less rather than significantly, because significantly is very open to interpretation. But other than that, I'm happy to support their motion.
All of them?
Can you clarify, please, Richard?
Yes, look, I'm also, as with Councillor Ryan, supporting the motion. I think there is a bit of a wake-up call here. I'm not sure whether there's enough traction in the wake-up call to get the changes that I think the Mayor is pleading for. But I am taking on board the comments from Dallas this morning, who I regard as an external, who does have a good finger on the pulse as to what's happening in this region, and I guess if I'm giving the present plan group a bit of an extra life, if you like, to see whether or not this report from Peter is going to be sufficient enough to prompt them, to incentivise them to make the changes. I'm not sure whether the Mayor's quite right on the waters collaboration. I do agree with a more latter decision, but I think the former decision there may have been that with the other council there may have been an opportunities for us had we wanted to go in that direction. But look, I'm happy to give this slightly extended life, providing some traction, but if we can't, I would like to see a very I'd like to see a report back fairly quickly if it's not going anywhere, so that we can perhaps consider your amendment, Mayor King. Thank you.
It's kind of a combination of my right and reply plus my right to speak to the change as well. So just bear with me, please. I won't take too long. I urge councillors to support the motion that I've put up that was well thought through during the break and was a matter of negotiation compromise, reasonable. I really would like councillors to understand regionalism and our role as the major metro to be a leader in this space. I agree, as Dallas said today and as Peter and Blair have said the same, that greater focus is now required on the deliverables, on what we can achieve together, and I'd like to think that can happen and be as successful as, in fact, another regional model, the Regional Land Transport Committee, has been at attracting investment into our part of the world. Councillor O'Leary is right, we are more than a hub, and Hamilton, and for that reason, Hamilton does need to remain the centre, the proper centre of the Waikato. I have to say that we've had very little reporting from Waikato Means Business in this term, but in the past there were pan-regional pan-regional forums, and the attendance from Hamilton City Council was very low. We do need some more regular reporting because I don't feel like we've had enough. We do get some verbal updates in the Mayor's report and an occasional report from Blair. Look, the triennial is there between the mayors, but it had no substance. Essentially, the triennial forum used to get to sign a document to say we'll all hold hands and sing together, but it did not have any work streams underneath it, and the Waikato plan was designed to create a focus going forward. It was a dog's breakfast, Councillor Dave. It is the situation that existed before the Waikato plan, in which you had all of those regional authorities, the territorial authorities across the region, not actually talking to each other about the pressures and opportunities in the Waikato. Let's not forget that if it wasn't for the Waikato plan, Waikato means business would not be in effect. If it wasn't for the Waikato plan, we would not have had a really good, competent chair kicking off Waikato's business. And that is just going from strength to strength. So look, let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater, and let's not throw our toys out of the cot because things are getting a little bit difficult and we're not making the progress that we want. This is a clear signal to the other councillors that progress must be made, and I think that Mayor Andrew will go forth and be a strong and firm leader in this debate.
You have?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment first. On board.
Sorry, I made a mistake.
Oh, we'll count it.
We'll count it.
Sorry.
I love that, eh?
Which mistake did you make?
The amendment is lost. 4 8 against.
Now we'll vote on the motion.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, so we're now, if I can find my bit of paper.
Going back to the delegation.
Where are we? Yep, sure. Feel naked without my shirt.
Great, thank you.
I'm moving.
In essence, councillors, just very quickly, the purpose of this report, which is item 13 on page 643, is simply to extend the Chief Executive's delegations during the month of July in order to transact any critical matters that cannot wait until the 2nd of August. There's caveats, as you can see in the recommendations. There's only those things that he is lawfully allowed to do, and this is similar to the approach between trienniums when we don't have a council. The CE will report back to you on the 2nd of August any and all decisions he takes on your behalf in that time.
Was he trustworthy last time?
He's on.
I have full delegated authority to exit the Waikato plan.
Okay, moved by Rob, seconded by Sabo, sorry. Okay, sorry, I missed all of that. Okay, all those for? Any against? Carried. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought you were saying you'd moved.
No, it's just a very straightforward question, really. Are there already, and I know this is just in case, but Richard, are there any things that you foresee you're going to have to make a decision in July in this quiet month that we've put ahead of us?
No, the big thing today was sorted out.
Pardon?
And the big thing today was getting the HIF sorted out, the Housing Infrastructure Fund. That's been done.
So you might make decisions
pertaining
to that? Or
everything,
no?
but I'm just saying that was a big decision to get authority to sign that off. That was urgent. The rest of it is just business as usual. There's
Okay,
nothing,
so you're
there's
not
nothing
really
worrying
expecting.
me.
Okay.
Nothing's worrying me.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Anyone
Mayor
else?
Andrew.
Those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, we're now moving to item 12 on page 640. Page 640 in the big fat book.
Chair's report, item 12.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Yep. Sorry? No, I won't. No, not at this stage, I won't. Councillor Siggy, could you get your motion up, please?
Can I do that verbally, or does it have to be written?
Yeah, verbal's fine. Yeah.
Verbal's fine? Okay.
Okay, so I'll put up the Chair's report with Deputy Mayor seconding it, so yours becomes the amendment.
So, should I just say it now?
Yep.
Okay. My amendment is to appoint Councillor Kesson to the Community and Services Committee as Deputy Chair.
Okay.
And I have a seconder.
Yeah, okay. All right, so are we in questioning? I'll take Councillor Paula.
Not questioning.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thanks. I've got two I hope, relatively simple questions. First one is to Mayor Andrew. When you said you were going to do the mid-term review, I recall that the mid-term review also included the review of whether or not you would reinstate the various panels that were dropped at the time that the triennium started. And I just noticed this report, which I assume is the completion of your mid-term review, is silent in respect to the young people's panel and the youth panel and around the older people. And I think there may have been some others, but I'm not quite sure, which were carryovers from the previous term.
Yeah. So this is sending those aren't being reinstated.
They are not to be okay.
The aspect that's outstanding, Councillor Pascoe, which is noted in the report, is that the governance manager and I are currently going through the terms of references and of the committees.
I read that. Yep. And the only other question I've got is probably towards democracy, and that is if item D is approved by council and we have a committee of 2 people, is it appropriate to have a chair when you have a committee of 2? I mean, it really is just a structure issue.
Well, the quorum will be 2.
Yeah, but you've got a chair, which is likely to be me, a chair and one other.
So you could have a chair and one other. You could have co-chairs.
So is it appropriate under our structure to have a chair when you only have a committee of 2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I volunteer to be the chair.
I'm sure you would.
Okay, Councillor Angela, did you have a question?
Just a question. I couldn't remember who, and support it, but couldn't remember who was on the original CEO Review Committee. Oh. Was it the chairs? Well, I know it was yourself and Councillor.
It was the chairs and the Deputy Mayor.
No, it was the chairs, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Pascoe.
And Councillor Pascoe. Okay, great. Thanks. Couldn't remember.
And Councillor Pascoe was the chair.
Okay, so Councillor Siggy for debate.
Yeah. Sorry, what's the process? Have we moved this as a motion from the chair? Yeah. It's been moved and seconded? Because I can't hear that, yeah.
Yeah, Mayor King and Deputy Mayor, and then the amendment.
Siggy's amending 1 point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Just to that appointment, look, I was just stunned by the appointment, because it was on the basis of age, and I just thought it was a slightly shallow argument, but and I personally thought it should be the best person for the job, but I do acknowledge that it is the mayor's prerogative to appoint the chairs and the deputy chairs. So that's just my comment on that.
Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Andrew. Look, I won't be supporting the amendment, and that is absolutely not a reflection of Councillor Casson. He attends many community events and has been working hard in the term, as have other members. But I fully support and have always done, Mayor Andrew, the Mayor's right to appoint, whether I agree with them or not, members to committees, and I think that that is something that should be, can't think of the word, it's very unusual that I've lost a word. Honoured. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously, totally respect the talent around this table and absolutely respect the experience and passion of Councillor Casson, who would have done the job really well. I, like the previous speaker, respect the Mayor's choice, and just for the record, I had no input whatsoever in this particular report. I wasn't consulted, neither other chairs, so this is entirely the Mayor's decision. The irony for me is we've talked about youth. Isn't it interesting that the youngest youthful councillor, I think, is chronologically slightly older than our Prime Minister? So our youth councillor is older than the PM. So I guess one advantage he brings, like as the PM would say, at least he's hopefully youth adjacent, which is good. But as I said, I respect that either of the three people who have been mentioned could have done the job in very different ways with great ability, and this in this case has been the Mayor's choice. And should the Council uphold this recommendation, or then I wish Councillor Ryan well.
James.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I was actually going to nominate Siggy, but she turned that down. But look, not once did Mayor Andrew ask me what I can offer or what I have done to qualify as the Deputy Chair of the Community Services. And I think the Mayor's reasons need to be challenged on this. I'm absolutely passionate about the Hamilton community, and the passion and my numerous community links have led to my election in 2016 with a very healthy number. Look, Angela is an expert in local government. Jeff is an expert in being an editor of a very good business news publication. Leo is an expert in traffic matters, and Rob is an expert in financial matters. I consider myself an expert in community matters. I have extremely strong links with a lot of groups in Hamilton. That's including the South Africans, the Solomon Islanders, where I worked there in 2005, and I still have the strong links where I'm a guest speaker at their Independence Day celebrations in Mangere this year. I have, look, I'm a Hamilton resident and a Hamilton ratepayer, and I have been since 1992. I have skin in the game. This is a matter of principle for me. I have a lot of backers out there in the community, and one of them is the Gallagher family, where I'm invited to many community events that they hold in my role as a councillor. I'm also a member of the Neighbourhood Support Group national body here in Hamilton that has over 1,000 groups in the Hamilton region. In 2003, I had association with CRs McPherson and O'Leary in helping stop a liquor store opening in the Marden Road area. Now, I shouldn't have done so at the time because I was a police officer. We policed the liquor licence, but I had the strong feelings in the community there and the backing from the Enley community to stop that, which I was very proud to be associated with. I have strong links with the local Fijian community in Hamilton, and I was elected Board of Trustees for the St John's College Chair, and I was Chair of the Pastoral Care and Property Committees. I'm still an active member of the Hamilton RSA. I'm an active supporter and major contributor to the Waikato Breast Care Trust, and also a supporter and major contributor to the Christmas in the Park Flagstaff Trust that's happening this year. I think most of those things there actually qualify me for a Deputy Chair. I've worked on it for 18 months. So the appointment by the Mayor on age to be ageism. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I was given 4 names of councillors that were being considered by the Mayor for Deputy, and asked if I could work with any of them, and I replied I could work with each and every one of those 4 councillors for the skills that they bring. I do have some sympathy, and I will work closely and fairly with my deputy, and I'll support Andrew's right to appoint people to the as he wishes, as he did the first time round as well. But I will speak up and say that I very much admire Ziggy for her level of attendance at community events. She's always there. Thank you, Ziggy, because there are a lot of hours that go in. And honestly, she goes days and she's all over the place. James also has done a lot in the community, and I regularly see him at events as well. And I am aware of the amount of effort that he puts into community events, especially on the east side of Hamilton. So, you know, look, I do feel for them in that regard. But as everyone has rightly said, and I'm sure, Ryan, that you also bring skills to the job, so I'm more than happy to work alongside you, as we had a conversation about that the other night. So that's all I've got to say. I do understand where the other two sit, however, on this issue.
Councillor Mark.
Yeah, I find this all a little bit embarrassing. I do reject this talk of ageism and stuff, because I think that's all spawned out of a social media bar mischievous media report, and it's a comment that's been grabbed and thrown around. I respect the Mayor's decision to it, but to appoint who he wishes based on skill and the right person for the job. But I do have to mention that, you know, I just wish that we weren't having this discussion because I messed up, and we wouldn't be having this discussion, I think, if I hadn't messed up. And this is Philip's job. So I think whatever we do, we've got to do it with decorum and class and the same grace that Philip would have approached it at.
Councillor Dove.
A little bit of fun as well, I think, Councillor Bunting. Yeah, thank you. So in that vein, I can't help but ask what Ryan has done to be so punished. But I also make the point that actually the Mayor does not have the right to appoint anyone. He has the right to nominate. I think maybe that's what people meant, but just be careful. The Mayor can't tell us who it is. We can accept or reject or change that. That's just a matter of democracy. I'm really pleased that love has broken out between Councillor James and Councillor Siggy, because in the very recent past, things that they have said in polite company about each other haven't been quite so loving. But it's great now that you've got over that and you're supporting each other. And I do think that any one of the three mentioned could easily do the job. But in this case, I think I'm going to support Councillor Ryan because he needs punishment.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, look, this is it's always a slightly awkward when in these sorts of discussions. I think it's fairly insulting to Councillor Ryan for this talk of ageism and stuff like that. To me, it's a debate about merit. And I believe that is actually why he's been nominated for this. There's no doubt in my mind that Ryan has made quite an impression since he's arrived in this chamber, and I don't think that's anyone's attention. Absolutely no disrespect to James at all, and I think every person around this table is a fine representative. James, if I could offer my own advice, it would be that I do find Ryan good to engage with and have discussions with issues, and where you actually feel that you can discuss something and have a bit of to and fro. And I haven't found that same ease with you on issues where I wanted to talk about things, and I have not found that there's been a lot of movement there, to be honest. And I just think, sorry, but we're having discussion about merits here, and so there you go. So I'm being honest. So to me, talk of age is just pure BS. It's about merit, and that's why he's been nominated, and I'll support his nomination.
Not everybody can be a winner. And James, you are a straight shooter, and I admire you for that, and acknowledge that you have the right to bring this discussion here today. The three of you are good, Siggy, James and Ryan. but I am choosing on age. Ryan is over a decade younger than anyone else around this table, and we've always talked about giving a voice to young people. And that's what made the difference on the three of you. And I unashamedly stand by what I said, that I've given Ryan the job out of three good people based on his age. So we'll go to the board to vote. So we're voting first. Siggy? Mine's is the motion, Siggy's is the amendment. What's this about, Darren?
Why don't we take the whole lot except for that item and then do that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Sorry?
Okay, yes, I understand if you just take it in parts. So, do you want to run this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if I understand it...
So we're on the amendment. So the first thing we're going to vote on is everything apart from... How do we do this?
Everything apart from B, I'll oppose that.
Okay, so we'll do that first, okay? So we're voting on everything apart from B, all right?
We're voting on A, C, D.
So, yeah, A, C and D. So we'll go to the board. So hang on, let's just reset the board, please. Yeah. Look, as the democracy managers correctly pointed out, either way, you're going to get A, B and D anyway. A, C and D. So we may as well just vote on one and then the other. Do you follow that? Because we're gonna get the things you're worried about anyway. So we're firstly voting on the amendments, which is the Siggy Casson, the Henry Casson amendment.
So that's the amendment to put James up as the deputy chair.
Do you hear me?
The amendment is lost, 3 for, 9 against.
So we're now voting on the motion.
The motion is carried, 11 for, 1 against.
Okay, we'll now move to exclude the public, and that includes the general managers. That clears the whole room of everybody apart from the democracy manager. And no.
Yeah.
I think we'd all like to.
There's no real reason for them to leave, though, is there, at this stage?
Yeah, there is.
Oh, is there?
Yep.
Am I leaving?